Chapter 459. As Chu Xiu's saber shocked everyone present, Li Yuan turned to the three crown prince's guests and said, "Do you still think it's overkill for me to let you take action?" The three warriors looked at each other in dismay. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed somewhat beyond their imagination. Right now, the warriors in the southwest were temporarily scared to the point of not daring to move forward, so they could only take the lead. Li Yuan looked at Zhang Tiantu and the others who had not made a move before and frowned. "Master Zhang, what is the meaning of this? Since you have joined the Crown Prince's camp, then don't be half-hearted. Let's all work together to take care of this Chu Xiu. After that, you will be rewarded according to your contributions. Don't worry, with His Highness's benevolent reputation, they will definitely not let you suffer any losses." Zhang Tiantu nodded and followed them out. But at this moment, Zhang Tiantu, Lu family head Lu Ji, Azure Point Sword Sex Han Tingyi, and Qing Feng Stronghold Song Lian all suddenly made a move at the same time and launched a sneak attack on their companions. Especially Zhang Tiantu. He happened to be following behind a guest of the Crown Prince. His iron sword seemed inconspicuous, but when it was unsheathed, it was sharp and cold. Its speed was simply fast to the extreme. With one sword strike, it broke the law and directly beheaded the unguarded guest on the spot. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Li Yuan didn't think that Zhang Tiantu's group of 4 would suddenly betray them. Even the other martial artists of the southwest region didn't think that Zhang Tiantu's group would suddenly betray them. After the sneak attack, the 4 of them naturally did not dare to continue to stay there. They directly turned around and ran to Chu Xiu's side. Everyone was so shocked that no one actually intercepted them. Zhang Tiantu and the other 3 even looked at each other, revealing a strange expression in their eyes. Originally, they thought that they were the only traitors. They did not expect that there would be so many comrades. At this time, Li Yuan finally reacted. He pointed at Zhang Tiantu and the others and shouted angrily, "Zhang Tiantu! The 4 of you dare to betray His Highness the Crown Prince? Are you looking to die?" Up until now, Li Yuan still could not understand how Chu Xiu had managed to make the 4 families who had already agreed to join the Crown Prince betray him. Or it could be said that it was not Chu Xiu's doing at all, but the second prince had long been aware of their movements, so he had done something in advance. However, Li Yuan had no time to think about this at the moment because with the betrayal of Zhang Tiantu and the others, their side had lost a martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm and injured 3 people. The situation had been reversed. Most importantly, those martial artists of the southwest who had maintained their neutrality and were prepared to follow the crowd were now wavering. On one side was the Crown Prince, and on the other side was the second prince. In fact, it didn't matter who they chose to side with. The simplest method was to side with whoever was stronger. Previously they had felt that the Crown Prince was very powerful, but now they felt that the second prince seemed to be even more powerful. At this time, in the face of Li Yuan's questioning, Zhang Tiantu and the other 2 looked a little ugly. They did not really want to betray, but they were forced to do so. Zhang Tiantu cupped his hands and said, "Lord Li, there are some things that we do not want to do, but there is nothing we can do. Fate makes fools of people. Now, we can only stand on the opposite side of His Highness the Crown Prince." Song Qian curled his lips. He did not have so many reasons to be helpless. It was entirely because the second prince was more generous than the Crown Prince that he chose to betray. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Sect Master Zhang, since you have already betrayed us, why are you still talking so much nonsense? Why do you regret it now?" Zhang Tiantu and the others hurriedly shook their heads. They had already betrayed the Crown Prince. If they offended the second prince's people now, it would be purely courting death. "It's good that you don't regret it." Chu Xiu nodded. He suddenly waved his hand and shouted, "Kill!" As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Eunuch Li and Feng Zhenqi directly led their people and charged forward. Although from the beginning of the plan until now, Eunuch Li and Feng Zhenqi had always existed as Chu Xiu's assistants, their real strength was not weak. Eunuch Li was a eunuch from the imperial palace. In the past, he was sent to be LV Longguang's personal eunuch. This was already enough to prove Eunuch Li's strength. Eunuch Li did not use any weapons. His hands were his best weapons. Every palm strike brought with it an awe-inspiring coldness that directly froze the martial artist's meridians and true energy. It could be said to be incomparably evil. Feng Zhenqi, on the other hand, was the opposite of Eunuch Li. His martial arts were extremely firm and fierce. With a long spear in his hand, Every spear strike was like the pressure of Mount Tai, crushing mountains and breaking mountains. With Fang Zhenqi and Eunuch Li taking the lead, as well as Zhang Tiantu and the others attacking together, the Crown Prince's side was almost instantly suppressed. As for the group of martial artists from the southwest, apart from a small portion who still chose to stand on the Crown Prince's side, the majority of them were actually just watching from the sidelines. These martial artists from the southwest actually had no loyalty to the Crown Prince to speak of. For these martial artists from the wildlands who spent most of their time killing, the truth was that the victor was king. If they wanted to choose someone to side with, they would naturally choose the strongest one. Chu Xiu brandished his saber and charged at Li Yuan. He had schemed so much. Besides taking revenge on the Crown Prince, one of the reasons was to kill Li Yuan and seize his good fortune. Seeing that Chu Xiu was charging at him, Li Yuan's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly shouted, "Stop Chu Xiu!" Following Li Yuan's shout, his subordinates, who were at the Five Qis Origin realm, and a foreign chamberlain at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, all charged towards Chu Xiu. If one person could not stop Chu Xiu, then a group of people would do. Although Li Yuan's strength was inferior to these vassals, he was the Crown Prince's trusted aide and had a very high status among the Crown Prince's subordinates. Thus, apart from Eunuch Chen and Li Yuan, nothing could happen to anyone but the two of them. The vassal who attacked Chu Xiu used a weapon that was rarely seen in the martial arts world. It was a gigantic deep gold broadaxe that was as tall as a person. He was also a burly man, and it was obvious that he was walking the path of physical strength. With a swing of the broadaxe, the surrounding stellar energy was stirred up by the power of the broadaxe. With an incomparably majestic aura, the broadaxe chopped down at Chu Xiu's head. Martial artists who cultivated this kind of martial arts did not need much technique to speak of. When their strength reached the extreme, they could directly use their strength to break everything. However, it was a pity that this vassal had not reached this realm. At the very least, when facing Chu Xiu, he could not unleash his strength at all. The stars in Chu Xiu's eyes rotated, and the sun and moon changed. The power of the heaven's sun gazing at air was unleashed by him to the extreme. At the same time, coupled with the extreme speed that erupted from the internal binding seal, Chu Xiu could easily dodge all the attacks of the broadaxe. However, Chu Xiu was not simply dodging. His figure directly swept behind Chu Xiu. Several Five Qis Origin realm martial artists had already surrounded him, wanting to hold Chu Xiu back and create an opportunity for the Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artist behind him who was holding the broadaxe. The heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hands suddenly slashed out, condensing devil qi and evil qi into his body. The sword will of the Avicii Dao 3 sabers was also integrated into it, making this saber extremely terrifying. The scene of Chu Xiu using this saber to kill an Unity of Heaven and Man realm expert was still vivid in their minds. The expressions of the Five Qis Origin realm martial artists suddenly changed, and they immediately wanted to dodge. The other martial artists dodged in time, but one of them was a little too slow. He was directly pulled into the saber aura. With a loud bang, a mist of blood drifted away, and there was no one left on the scene. This person was much more unlucky than the Su family's patriarch, and he died without a complete corpse. Chu Xiu stepped forward, and another Five Qis Origin realm martial artist wanted to take advantage of the gap in Chu Xiu's saber to launch a sneak attack. However, Chu Xiu's left hand pinched the treasure vase seal, and in an instant, an infinite Buddha's light bloomed, directly blasting the Five Qis Origin realm martial artist away, and a large mouthful of blood gushed out. With a wave of one hand, boundless devil qi erupted, and the martial artist's blood was sucked out of his body along with the devil qi. In less than 3 breaths, his entire body had been sucked dry by Chu Xiu's devil blood technique. When the devil blood technique was created, it was not actually used to kill people. It was only used as a support in battle, and it was used in preparation for using the blood-dissipating saber. After all, when two martial artists of similar strength were fighting, it was too difficult to use the devil blood technique to absorb all the blood and qi of the other party. However, although Chu Xiu and the Five Qis Origin realm martial artist were in the same realm, the combat effectiveness of the two sides seemed to be a whole realm apart. The other party could not block Chu Xiu's devil blood technique at all. Taking another step forward, Chu Xiu waved one hand, and the blood that had been sucked out by Chu Xiu condensed into an evil blood blade, slashing out in a direction. Even though the martial artist dodged left and right, the blood blade seemed to be able to predict his position in advance, and instantly pierced through him at an incredible angle. In the blink of an eye, he had killed 2 people, and Chu Xiu took another step towards Li Yuan. At this moment, Li Yuan really began to panic. Why did this Chu Xiu seem to be stronger than when he was in the Luo family? Block Chu Xiu. After Li Yuan shouted this sentence, he directly turned around and fled. Although this kind of action seemed a little too cowardly, in Li Yuan's opinion, this was called rational. Chu Xiu had clearly come for him, and if he did not kill him, he would not stop. If he did not run at this time, could it be that he was going to die? Seeing that Chu Xiu was going to chase Li Yuan again, the Unity of Heaven and Human Realm martial artist holding the giant axe behind him could not help but feel anxious. The giant axe in his hand was surrounded by a storm of Gang Qi, and he wanted to intercept Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu, who had been dodging just now, suddenly turned around and attacked the Unity of Heaven and Human Realm martial artist holding the giant axe. As the murderous intent descended, Chu Xiu's eyes were already dyed with a layer of dark red. The annihilation of heaven and earth oblivion killing fist suddenly burst out, and the absolute power of the fist directly caused the giant axe in the Unity of Heaven and Human Realm martial artist's hand to tremble. In addition, he had always thought that Chu Xiu only wanted to kill Li Yuan and would not turn around to tangle with him, so he was not prepared at all. When they suddenly exchanged blows, even the giant axe in his hand almost flew out of his hand. Chapter 460. Chu Xiu turned around and attacked the warrior, catching him off guard. Under the powerful force of the extinguishing sky and destroying earth oblivion killing fist, the giant axe in his hand almost flew out. However, before he could react, Chu Xiu had already attacked again. The great Vajra wheel seal fell and the Buddha's light exploded. The Vajra demon's subduing power blasted him back a few steps. The sun wheel seal was formed and the 5 elements rotated in an instant. The powerful force that seemed to be endless directly cracked his hand, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this time, Chu Xiu did not stop at all. He turned around and formed the Aquarius seal again. In an instant, a supreme light bloomed, and the powerful force directly blasted the giant axe in his hand away. The Unity of Heaven and Human Realm warrior looked at Chu Xiu in horror. At this time, his hands were dripping with blood, and several of his bones were broken. He was a warrior who specialized in body-enhancing techniques. Because of this, he was very confident in his own strength. Although he had not fought with the Great Light Temple's warriors before, he was confident that his strength was not inferior to the Great Light Temple's warrior monks. In the end, in front of Chu Xiu, his confidence was shattered to nothing. A 5-Chi's origin realm warrior whose realm was lower than his could crush him to such an extent in terms of strength. However, at this time, he did not have time to think too much. Chu Xiu was already charging at him with the demonic blade in his hand. Without a weapon, the warrior directly punched at Chu Xiu. The powerful wind from the punch seemed to be able to tear the sky and the earth, and its power was not inferior to his giant axe. However, Chu Xiu's blade suddenly became extremely ethereal. Just as the warrior's fist was about to land, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly changed direction. Demonic qi surged like an antelope hanging its horn, and it easily chopped off one of the warrior's arms. The martial artist roared angrily. Not only did he not flee, but he even ignited all the blood and qi in his body, dyeing his other arm red. With boundless power, he once again blasted towards Chu Xiu. Unfortunately, all of this was useless. Under Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air, this kind of martial path with simple transformations was the easiest for Chu Xiu to see through. At this moment, that cultivator didn't know at all that Chu Xiu had already laid out an inescapable net, and he was the prey in the net. No matter how he struggled, it was futile. The long saber swept down, and Chu Xiu's figure was like the wind. Amidst the roar of demonic qi, a human head flew into the sky. That martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm had been beheaded by Chu Xiu. In all fairness, the strength of this martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm was relatively good, but his strength could only be considered good. In the end, it was still difficult for him to escape the fate of being killed by Chu Xiu. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Li Yuan. After being blocked for so long, with Li Yuan's speed, he was about to escape from the cave. As the leader of this matter, Li Yuan was the first to escape. This kind of thing was not good to say, and when he returned to the Crown Prince, he could easily be punished by the Crown Prince. But at this moment, Li Yuan couldn't care about anything else. Chu Xiu's goal was obviously to kill him. If he didn't escape now, he would be giving his life away. With his hand forming the inner binding seal, Chu Xiu's figure seemed to have shrunk to an inch. With a step, he had already crossed a distance of over 100 feet. In just a few breaths' time, he had already arrived behind Li Yuan. Moreover, at this time, Eunuch Chen and the others were already entangled by Eunuch Li and Feng Zhenqi. There was no martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm to save Li Yuan. As for the other martial artists at the Five Chi's origin realm, whether they could withstand Chu Xiu's move was a problem. Seeing that he couldn't escape, Li Yuan turned around and shouted, "Chu Xiu!" Chu Xiu didn't want to give Li Yuan a chance to speak at all. What greeted Li Yuan was Chu Xiu's saber. Seeing the surging demonic aura and sanguine aura descend, Li Yuan condensed the Gang Qi around his body to the extreme. He punched out with both fists, and the green Gang Qi directly evolved into an Gang Qi shield of over 100 feet in front of him. However, it was easily destroyed by Chu Xiu. The demonic aura entered his body, and blood flowed uncontrollably from the corner of Li Yuan's mouth. At this moment, Chu Xiu slashed down with his saber again. Li Yuan could no longer resist it head-on. The blood and qi around his body burned, and his speed instantly rose to the extreme. He wanted to dodge and escape. However, just as he moved, Chu Xiu's saber momentum had already followed him like a shadow. Under Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, any of Li Yuan's movements could be seen clearly. Unless his speed was faster than Chu Xiu's, to the extent that even if Chu Xiu could use the heaven's sun gazing at air to see through his movements, Chu Xiu wouldn't be able to catch up to him. Only then would he be able to escape. However, it was a pity that Li Yuan didn't have such speed. Therefore, he could only watch as the saber slashed towards him. In the face of life and death, Li Yuan roared angrily, and the blood and qi around his body burned to the extreme. The shadow of a blood-colored demon appeared behind him, and he condensed his fist intent to meet Chu Xiu's saber. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly retracted his saber and retreated. The saber actually didn't slash down. Just as Li Yuan was feeling puzzled, the demonic aura in Chu Xiu's hand rose. The blood and qi around Li Yuan suddenly burned at a speed that was 10 times faster than before. The majestic power of the blood and qi soared into the sky, and even the shadow of the demon that had condensed behind him was burning. Li Yuan definitely didn't know how terrifying the Great Demonic Blood Technique was. Sometimes, in the face of the Great Demonic Blood Technique, putting his life on the line was a luxury. Looking at Chu Xiu, Li Yuan roared in indignation. His blood and qi were completely burned, and his body shriveled up like a zombie as he fell to the ground. Looking at Li Yuan's corpse below, Chu Xiu actually felt a little sad. A future big shot had died at his hands. Just like that. This made Chu Xiu feel like he had changed history. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, Li Yuan wasn't any different from others before he received the inheritance of the opportunity. In fact, among the warriors of the same level, he could only be said to be not bad, but not the best. How could a golden qilin be a creature in a pond? It could transform into a dragon when it encountered a storm. For most of the warriors in the pugilistic world, unless you were the little celestial master Zhang Qingjin or wisdom king Zhongshuan, who was born with a halo, the others were mostly nameless existences before they became famous. They could only wait for the opportunity that belonged to them to appear. For example, Luo Feiheng's falling out with the Luo family was an opportunity. Lu Fengxian obtaining the inheritance of the ancient demon god Lv1 Ho was also such an opportunity. However, Li Yuan no longer had this opportunity now. However, it didn't matter. Chu Xiu could fight for it and see if he could get this opportunity. At that moment, the second prince's side had completely started to suppress the crown prince's side. When Eunuch Chen saw that Li Yuan had also been killed, his expression changed several times. He waved his hand and decisively retreated with his people. Li Yuan was dead. He also knew that he had completely messed up this time. It would be fine if he messed up. After all, he was the crown prince's personal eunuch and could be said to have watched the crown prince grow up. Even if he messed up, he wouldn't be punished. However, if he lost his life, he would lose everything. Therefore, Eunuch Chen was unusually decisive in escaping. As for Feng Zhenqi's side, they didn't choose to give chase. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but although they had the upper hand in terms of strength, they didn't have a crushing advantage. If they forcefully chased after the second prince and killed him, not to mention whether they could kill him or not, they would have to bear a considerable amount of losses themselves. They wouldn't do something like sacrificing 800 men to kill 1,000 enemies. Even if they sacrificed 500 of their own, Feng Zhenqi and Eunuch Li would still feel that they had suffered a loss. The outcome had been decided. Eunuch Li walked over and said with a smile, "This time, it was all thanks to official Chu's help. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do it so beautifully." Chu Xiao casually cupped his hands and said, "Eunuch Li is too polite. We just took what we needed." With Li Yuan dead, the Crown Prince's plan was completely ruined. What happened next was not something that Chu Xiao could meddle in. Chu Xiao didn't care whether the second prince killed or kept the warriors in the southwest. He just waited for Eunuch Li and the others to leave after dealing with these matters. The ones who returned to Daliang City before Chu Xiao and the others were naturally Eunuch Chen and the others. When Eunuch Chen had gone, he had brought along the experts under the Crown Prince, looking as if he was determined to win. However, when he returned, Li Yuan was dead. 2 of the 3 consecrators at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm had died. More than half of his subordinates had also died. It was a miserable sight. At this time, the Crown Prince was still in his residence, reading and cultivating his mind. Of course, the Crown Prince didn't have much time to read. Most of the time, he was enjoying himself. The rest of the time, he was arranging for his subordinates to develop their various factions. Seeing Eunuch Chen return in such a miserable state, LV Longji's expression immediately changed. He hurriedly asked, "Where's Li Yuan? What's going on? Could it be that something happened in the southwest?" Eunuch Chen's face was filled with grief and indignation. "This old servant is guilty. Please punish me, Your Highness." As he spoke, Eunuch Chen recounted everything to LV Longji, including the reason why Chu Xiao had interfered in this matter. After listening, LV Longji's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. "Idiot! Trash! Scoundrel! Who told you to provoke Chu Xiao on your own?" LV Longji, who had always displayed a good upbringing, couldn't help but start cursing loudly. He wanted nothing more than to drag the already dead Li Yuan out from the ground and punish him severely. It was the same for this Chen Dou. He had never imagined that his plans would once again be foiled by the same person, and that person was Chu Xiao again. If it could be said that Chu Xiao had accidentally stood on the opposite side of him previously, then this time, it was purely because of his own actions. But the heavens took pity on him. LV Longji really had no intention of making trouble for Chu Xiao. As the Crown Prince, LV Longji's reputation in the outside world had been pretty good, such as being courteous to the wise and magnanimous. But regardless of whether he was truly magnanimous or not, he would not go so far as to hold a grudge against Chu Xiao for what had happened to Jiang Wenyuan. After all, although Chu Xiao was famous, compared to him the Crown Prince, he was still a minor character. Although the Crown Prince would often mutter these words, he himself had forgotten them as time went by. In the end, Li Yuan and Chen Dou had gone behind his back to provoke Chu Xiao. Not only had they failed to kill him, they had even forced Chu Xiao to side with the second prince, ruining his plans. LV Longji was so angry that his hands were trembling. Chapter 461. The Crown Prince, LV Longji, was actually the most unlucky one to be hit by this unexpected disaster. Because from the beginning, he did not know what was going on. Suddenly, his arrangements in the southwest were destroyed by Chu Xiao. Who could he go to reason with? Find Chu Xiao for revenge? Right now, Chu Xiao was with the second prince, and he was under house arrest. If he wanted to use the power of the imperial court to teach Chu Xiao a lesson, once things got out of hand, he would probably be the one to suffer. And now, even if LV Longji wanted to teach his subordinates a lesson, he could not do so. Li Yuan was already dead, and he could not really dig him up and whip his corpse again. Eunuch Chen was LV Longji's close confidant, and it could even be said that he would never betray him. He also controlled all kinds of forces under LV Longji, so LV Longji could not blame him too much. So LV Longji could only say unhappily, "All right, let's forget about this matter for now. But next time if you dare to do these things on your own, then you can go and retire." Eunuch Chen hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, this old servant will not dare." The Crown Prince's side was gloomy, but the second prince was very proud. Almost all the martial artists in the southwest had joined the second prince's side. Of course, they had no choice but to join the second prince. For example, Zhang Tiantu and the others had already chosen to be traitors. If they did not join the second prince, then who would help them block the Crown Prince's revenge? As for the other powers that chose to remain neutral, they followed the trend and sided with the second prince. So after returning to Great Liang City, the second prince personally called Chu Xiao over and said sincerely, "Chu Xiao, are you really not willing to join this prince's side? You have seen this prince's strength. My elder brother was only born a little earlier than me. In terms of strength and ability, how can he compare to me? If you join this prince's side, this prince will definitely not treat you unfairly. Eunuch Li is this prince's trusted eunuch. In the future, if this prince ascends to the throne, he will be the chief minister of the imperial household. And if you, Chu Xiao, join this prince, then this prince dares to grant you the position of great general. You can choose any one of them." This time, LV Longguang really saw Chu Xiao's strength and ability. He actually had quite a number of experts under him. There were those who gave him advice and suggestions, and there were also those who specialized in killing people. The only thing he lacked was someone like Chu Xiao, who was not bad at scheming. He was also very strong and could take charge of an area by himself. Therefore, this time, LV Longguang was sincerely trying to recruit Chu Xiao. He even made a promise to become a marquis. However, Chu Xiao still shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I can't let whole Master Guan down. The Guanzhong torture room didn't let me down, so I naturally can't let the Guanzhong torture room down." Although Chu Xiao's words were dignified, he was laughing coldly in his heart. In this lifetime, he would never join any prince of Eastern Qi. Not to mention that Chu Xiao was not the kind of person who would willingly submit to others. The main reason was that he knew how long the emperor of Eastern Qi, Lu Haocheng, could live. The only advantage this Eastern Qi emperor had over him was that he had lived for a long time. He had almost outlived his two sons to death. If Chu Xiao were to join LV Longguang's side, it would be a long time before he could be conferred the title of Marquis and Prime Minister. Unless he could assassinate LV Haocheng and send him to the Western Paradise earlier, it would probably be impossible. LV Longguang frowned and said, "I know you want to repay the Guanzhong torture room's kindness. But a good bird chooses a good tree to fly. The Guanzhong torture room is not a good choice. Don't be fooled by the Guanzhong torture room's glory now. That's because the Guanzhong torture room is in a period of peace when the three countries are not at war. Therefore, the Guanzhong torture room thrives on the trade between the three countries. But if one day the three countries go to war, not to mention three countries, even if two of them go to war together, the Guanzhong torture room won't be able to withstand it." After all, LV Longguang was the second prince of Eastern Qi. He wouldn't spend all his time thinking about the infighting with the crown prince. He had an understanding of the world situation. Naturally, the Guanzhong torture room was the same. Some people in Jianghu had long seen that the times made heroes, and it was also the time for heroes to build momentum. The Guanzhong torture room happened to have talents like Chu Kuanga and Guan Siyu, and it happened to be during the period of armistice between the three countries. That was why the Guanzhong torture room had developed to its current scale. But if the next leader of the Guanzhong torture room was incompetent and couldn't maintain this balance, or if something unexpected happened between the three countries, the position of the Guanzhong torture room would be in danger. Chu Xiao still shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness, but I may have to disappoint you." Hearing Chu Xiao's words, LV Longguang sighed in disappointment, but he didn't force it. He wasn't stupid enough to forcefully recruit Chu Xiao as his subordinate. LV Longguang waved his hand and said, "Since you don't want to join me, I won't force you. Well, I have one more thing to ask for your help. Go to Donghai County." Chu Xiao originally wanted to refuse, saying that he had to go back to the Guanzhong torture room. However, when he heard LV Longguang mention the East Sea County, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. In the original plot, the place where Li Yuan obtained the inheritance of opportunity was in the East Sea County. This made Chu Xiao connect the dots. "Oh, what is it? Please tell me, Your Highness." LV Longguang said, "Here's the thing. The holy monk of Donghai, Master Tam Yuan, is coming to the Central Plains today to preach. In fact, Master Tam Yuan is old and his life is coming to an end, so he is going to return to the Central Plains to pass away. Because Master Tam Yuan is so famous, when Master Tam Yuan comes ashore, the royal family of Eastern Qi and many people in Jianghu will come out to welcome him." Speaking of this, LV Longguang looked a little depressed and said, "Father will definitely not come out, so I have to send someone with enough weight. My eldest brother is the crown prince, so he is naturally the first choice. This kind of thing is basically not difficult for him. Although father didn't ask me to go, he didn't say that I can't send someone. This king's subordinates are not easy to use, so I'll have to trouble you to help this king bring the gift to Master Tan Yuan. In any case, this king only needs to reveal my name in front of Master Tan Yuan and the many people of the Zhonghu. Chu Xiu listened quietly, but there was a strange look in his eyes. This was because the inheritance that Li Yuan obtained in the original plot belonged to this Master Tam Yuan. Speaking of this Master Tam Yuan was really famous, but it was not because of his strength but because of what he did. Of course, this Master Tam Yuan was also very strong. At his peak, he was even an expert in the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. This Master Tam Yuan was not from the Great Light Temple, nor was he from the Sabodhi Zen Temple. He was just a monk from a small temple. When he cultivated to the three-flower realm, he was already in his 50s. However, since then, Master Tam Yuan had decided to go east alone to spread Buddhism. There were many islands in the East Sea. These islands were large and small. Some were as big as a state, and some were even as big as a county. Therefore, there were a lot of people. However, because of the harsh environment, there were often natural disasters such as storms and tsunamis, so the warriors on these islands in the East Sea were somewhat violent. It was under such an environment that Master Tam Yuan went east alone, spreading Buddhism on every island and dispelling hostility and hatred. During this period, he experienced countless dangers and great horrors between life and death. His martial arts cultivation advanced rapidly, and he quickly climbed to the martial Dao master realm, becoming a famous master in the East Sea. If that was all, Master Tam Yuan's fame would not have reached the Central Plains. What really made Master Tam Yuan famous was a few decades ago. A warrior asked Master Tam Yuan to save the people on his island when a small island was engulfed by a tsunami. In the end, Master Tam Yuan actually made a move and fought against the power of heaven and earth alone. He even stepped into the true fire spiritual cultivation realm under the pressure. However, even the true fire spiritual cultivation realm was no match for the endless power of heaven and earth. In the end, although Master Tam Yuan managed to save the small island, his own foundation was also damaged. Not only was he severely injured, but he even fell back to the martial Dao master realm. It was impossible for him to make any progress in this life. Therefore, although he was a powerhouse in the true fire spiritual cultivation realm, he only stayed in this realm for a day. As this matter spread to the Central Plains, Master Tam Yuan was recognized by the entire pugilistic world as a true Buddhist master. Even the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery admired him very much. It was already very difficult for him to be willing to go to a barren land like the East Sea to spread Buddhism alone. However, Master Tam Yuan was willing to give up the powerful cultivation of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm to save the people on that island. Such a person deserved to be called a holy monk who truly had mercy in his heart. What martial art practitioners pursued in their entire lives was ultimate power. Even if the monks from the Great Light Temple always talked about being merciful, Chu Xiu could guarantee that none of the monks from the Great Light Temple would be willing to give up their cultivation to save the lives of an island. Chu Xiu never had a good impression of monks, but Master Tam Yuan could be said to be a true Buddhist master. There was no stain on his personal morality. According to the second prince, Master Tam Yuan came to the Central Plains because he was nearing the end of his lifespan. He was ready to return to his roots and pass away in the Central Plains. However, only Chu Xiu knew that Master Tam Yuan probably did not just want to return to his roots. He also wanted to find a successor. After all, Master Tam Yuan was also a warrior. He definitely had his own obsession when it came to martial arts inheritance. When he was in the East Sea, he only cared about spreading Buddhism and dispelling the hostility and hatred of the East Sea warriors. How could he have the time to teach disciples? Therefore, he came to the Central Plains this time because he wanted to find a reliable successor for himself before he passed away. However, Chu Xiu still did not understand why Master Tam Yuan would find Li Yuan to be his successor in the original plot. At least, Chu Xiu could not see any similarities between Li Yuan and Master Tam Yuan. However, this was no longer important. Li Yuan was already dead. If Chu Xiu wanted to seize Li Yuan's creation inheritance, he only needed to do one thing, and that was to lean towards Li Yuan as much as possible. As for whether this would work or not, it would depend on luck. Chapter 462. Chu Xiu had already decided to go to Donghai County to meet Master Tan Yuan, who was famous in Zhonghu. However, in the face of the second prince, Chu Xiu remained calm and said, "With my friendship with His Highness, this is not a problem. But now I have offended the crown prince. What should I do if the crown prince comes to make trouble for me?" The second prince waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. Since I asked you to go on my behalf, how could I not consider this problem? Although my eldest brother's identity and status are enough to meet Master Tam Yuan, my father is worried that he is too young to control the situation, so he specially sent another influential Wu Dao Grand Master, Xiao Baiyu, the Chancellor of Wuxia Academy. Lord Xiao Baiyu never participates in the struggle between princes, but there is a senior behind me who once made Lord Xiao Baiyu owe him a favor. If you go there, I will ask someone to bring a message to Lord Xiao Baiyu. As long as Lord Xiao Baiyu is there, my elder brother will never dare to hurt you." Chu Xiu nodded. He believed what the second prince said. With Xiao Baiyu's status in Eastern Qi, even the crown prince had to be polite to him. Although Xiao Baiyu was only a Wu Dao Grandmaster and not in the True Fire realm, he was more important to Eastern Qi than an expert in the True Fire realm. Every year, Wuxia Academy provided a large number of potential masters to the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. These people were the hope of the future for Eastern Qi, and Wuxia Academy was a continuous existence for the future of Eastern Qi. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu's status in the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was very special. Whether it was the Emperor of Eastern Qi or the General, they all had to be polite to Xiao Baiyu. With this promise, Chu Xiu directly took the second prince's gift to Donghai Prefecture. The second prince was not afraid that Chu Xiu would run away with the gift, because Master Tam Yuan was already a dying man. The second prince did not expect to win the support of Master Tam Yuan by sending a gift, so this time he just asked Chu Xiu to bring his gift to build up his reputation. The gift was naturally not something valuable. It was just a string of Buddha beads left by an eminent monk in antiquity times. Although it had been immersed in Buddha's light for a long time and had some power, it was not a precious treasure. With the gift, Chu Xiu directly went all the way to Donghai Prefecture. Donghai Prefecture was adjacent to the East Sea. Originally, it was not a prosperous place, and only some fleets coming and going from the East Sea often rested here. Therefore, the warriors of Eastern Qi and those on the islands of the East Sea were relatively common here. But with the news that Master Tam Yuan was about to return to the Central Plains, many people came to Donghai Prefecture in person, ready to see the glory of Master Tam Yuan, and most of them were warriors of the Buddhism sect. In recent years, the Buddhism sect was still extremely strong, but this strength was only in terms of force. When it came to the masters of the Great Light Temple or the Sabodhi Zen Temple, whether it was Su Yun or Su Ci, people would only say that they were masters of the Buddhism sect, but they would not be given the title of holy monk. To put it bluntly, even if someone wanted to give them the title, they would be too embarrassed to admit it. Therefore, Tan Yuan was now almost recognized in Jianghu as a master of the Buddhism sect, a holy monk of great virtue, worthy of being admired by many masters of the Buddhism sect. At this time, a dense crowd of warriors had gathered at the Dragon Beach at the mouth of Donghai Prefecture, waiting for the arrival of the fleet carrying Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiu was also leaning on a boulder, holding a pot of yellow wine that he had brought from a small town outside the Dragon Beach, and he was drinking it slowly. In fact, Chu Xiu had already been waiting here for 2 days. Of course, there was no fixed time for sailing on the sea, so Chu Xiu also patiently waited here, and at the same time, thought about what he would say when he met Master Tan Yuan. Of course, the most important thing was to lean his state of mind on Li Yuan. Only the heavens knew what he had said back then that could make a holy monk like Great Master Tan Yuan hand over all his knowledge to someone like Li Yuan. Although Chu Xiu did not have the qualifications to comment on Li Yuan's character, at the very least, that fellow could not be considered a good person. Furthermore, although he later became the northern Zhenbei king of Eastern Qi, a general who had once turned the tide and led the declining Eastern Qi to defeat the northern Yan, and had a good reputation in Eastern Qi, he was a hero to the enemy. At that time, Li Yuan was worthy of being called vicious and merciless. The people of the northern Yan hated him to the core. While Chu Xiu was deep in thought, there wasn't a single person around him. The closest person to him was over 100 feet away. As the person ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, everyone present naturally knew of Chu Xiu. In Eastern Qi, Chu Xiu's reputation was not that good. News of what had happened in the southwest had not spread so quickly. After all, the southwest was a remote and uncivilized land. Not to mention killing a few people, even if Chu Xiu had massacred a few sects, it would not have been obvious. But now that he had appeared here, Some anemophilia heard some news and spread the news of what Chu Xiao had done in the southwest. After all, others might not know about this, but the anemophilia definitely knew. However, the person who spread the news was probably not from Wind Sweeping Tower. Wind Sweeping Tower's anemophilia still had professional ethics and would not have such a cheap mouth. So in this way, everyone also knew that Chu Xiao had actually interfered in the struggle between the crown prince and the second prince and had begun to stir up trouble in the southwest. This fellow was really not a person who would settle down, so it was better to stay away from him. However, everyone was also a little curious about what Chu Xiao was doing here. Was he also here to welcome Master Tam Yuan? They all knew that Chu Xiao and those filthy people from the Great Light Temple had a lot of enmity with him from the Buddhist sect. In the end, Chu Xiao had come to welcome the Buddhist sect's holy monk, Tan Yuan. This was strange no matter how they looked at it. In particular, there were some Buddhist sect ancient martial art practitioners who came from small temples. They all secretly glared at Chu Xiao. Of course, they only glared at him in secret. They did not dare to glare at him openly. They were not from the Great Light Temple, so they did not have the courage to provoke Chu Xiao. At this moment, a person actually took the initiative to approach Chu Xiao and said in a doubtful tone, "Hey, isn't this Brother Chu? Why have you also come to welcome Master Tam Yuan? I heard that you have a good relationship with those monks." Wait, it's not just a rumor. It seems to be the truth. As this person approached, everyone present immediately began to discuss in low voices. The person who had come to Chu Xiao's side was Sword King City's Feng Qishao. At this moment, he was carrying a long sword diagonally. His white clothes were still stained with some wine stains, and his hair was a little messy. It was as if he had just been woken up from his bed. Chu Xiao also looked at Feng Qishao somewhat speechlessly. Why was it him again? Chu Xiao had a deep impression of this talkative sword leader. However, Chu Xiao did not have any enmity towards Feng Qishao. Although his relationship with Sword King City was not very good, Feng Qishao was different. It was difficult for people to really feel enmity towards him. Moreover, during the battle between the righteous and demonic factions on Floating Jade Mountain, Chu Xiao had used Feng Qishao's Karma Sword principle to greatly improve his cultivation of the heaven sun gazing at air. Therefore, in theory, he still owed Feng Qishao half a favor. Chu Xiao said faintly, "The Buddhist sect is the Buddhist sect, and Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan. I admire Master Tam Yuan's character. But what does it have to do with the Buddhist sect? Buddha is Buddha, people are people. Some people chant sutras and worship Buddha all their lives, but they do not do many good deeds. Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan. It has nothing to do with whether he comes from the Buddhist sect or not." Hearing Chu Xiao's words, the Buddhist sect warriors present glared at Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao's words were simply pointing at the mulberry tree and scolding the locust tree. No, it should be said that the Buddhist sect disciples were hypocrites. However, these monks were not stupid. Although they were angry, no one jumped out to argue with Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao also did not care about them. He just looked at Feng Qishao in surprise and said, "What are you doing here? The 5 major sword sects are not the Buddhist sect. Are you also here to welcome Master Tam Yuan because you admire him?" Feng Qishao spread out his hands and made a helpless expression. He said, "Master Tam Yuan's character is indeed worthy of admiration. But this kind of thing should be kept in the heart. Why bother to meet him? I can't be bothered to fish for fame." As soon as Feng Qishao said this, most of the people present looked a little gloomy, because they had indeed come with such a thought. However, Feng Qishao also directly ignored this group of people and continued to say, "I was having a good time in Eastern Chi's place. With my handsome appearance, the girls of Golden Wind Pavilion were very enthusiastic about me. In the end, before I had a good time, I was called up by the people of the sect. They insisted that I come to welcome Master Tam Yuan and make a wave of reputation. Although I know that I am handsome and irreplaceable, they did not inform me in advance about this kind of thing. This made me very passive." Speaking of this, Feng Qishao revealed a regretful expression. He shook his head and said, "When I left, the girls of Golden Wind Pavilion and the madam were still chasing after me. Eastern Chi is indeed the hinterland of the Central Plains. The girls here are hot and enthusiastic, much more enthusiastic than the girls in my western regions." Hearing this, Chu Xiao faintly felt that something was wrong. He suddenly said, "Don't tell me you didn't pay them?" Feng Qishao was stunned and said, "Pay what?" Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Don't you pay when you visit a brothel?" Seventh young master Feng said confidently, "When they pulled me in, they kept praising me. For a young master like me who is unparalleled in the world, it's already good enough that I didn't ask them for money. How could I give them money?" At this time, Chu Xiu was really shocked. He didn't know how to describe this Feng Qishao. Was this guy pretending to be stupid or was he really stupid? The third on the Longhu list, the future successor of Sword King City, and a genius swordsman, Feng Qishao actually visited a tyrant chicken. Who would believe such a thing? Chapter 463. Feng Qishao was probably the first person in history to talk about visiting a brothel without paying in such a refreshing and refined manner. Based on Feng Qishao's appearance, he was still a few levels away from visiting a brothel without paying. It would be more appropriate if he were someone like Lu Fengxian. Of course, as far as Chu Xiu knew, Lu Fengxian didn't seem to have such a hobby. However, if Feng Qishao revealed his identity, he probably wouldn't have to pay. Unfortunately, the girls in the brothel didn't care about the appearance of the experts on the Longhu list. Everyone in the crowd was talking about it. Perhaps they didn't expect that the famous Feng Qishao turned out to be such a person. However, there were still a few sword-wielding martial artists who didn't talk about it. Instead, they covered their faces in shame. How shameful! They were also from Sword King City and had accompanied Feng Qishao here. In fact, Feng Qishao didn't really visit a tyrant chicken. After the incident, they had already paid the brothel's proprietress. They thought that the matter would be over. Who would have thought that Feng Qishao would reveal it himself? These people even lamented inwardly. What kind of sin did Sword King City commit to have such an unreliable successor like Feng Qishao? Although Feng Qishao's cultivation in sword principle was indeed the best among the younger generation, the disciples of Sword King City would rather Feng Qishao be weaker than him. It would be better if he was more reliable than he was now. However, Feng Qishao didn't care about this at this time. Instead, he chatted with Chu Xiu and even freeloaded half of Chu Xiu's wine. Feng Qishao might be unreliable, but he still had his own pride. There were so many martial artists present, and among the younger generation, only Chu Xiu could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Therefore, even if he was unreliable, he would only talk nonsense with Chu Xiu here, and not randomly pick someone and say everything. At that moment, another group of people arrived. There were more than 100 of them, and it was a grand display. They were from the imperial court. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. The people from the Eastern Qi imperial court had arrived. Leading them were Crown Prince LV Longji and his men. This was the first time that Chu Xiu had seen LV Longji. Compared to the second prince, LV Longguang, this crown prince was much less outstanding. From his appearance, LV Longji had the appearance of a refined middle-aged man, with a trace of nobility, and a somewhat graceful feeling. Speaking of which, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was quite unlucky. He had a father who was very capable and didn't want to abdicate the throne. He had been the Crown Prince for decades. In fact, although the emperors of Eastern Qi were not short-lived, none of them lived too long. Being an emperor took a lot of effort. Before you ascended the throne, you could find time to practice. But when you sat on the throne, you could also practice. However, the premise was that you had to properly manage the affairs of the country, big or small, so that you could practice with peace of mind. Otherwise, even the imperial family of Eastern Qi would consider changing the emperor, let alone outsiders. Therefore, no matter how strong the emperors were when they ascended the throne, they basically worked too hard in the later stages. Even if they took some elixirs to prolong their lives, the effect was not great. In the end, LV Haochang's ability was so. He just happened to meet the requirements of being an emperor. Although he did not make any great contributions, he did not destroy the country. Moreover, with his ability, he could not do it even if he wanted to work his heart out. So in this way, LV Haochang, who was relieved, lived a long life. On the contrary, he caused his sons to suffer a bit. Of course, from Chu Xiu's point of view, Lu Longji was not only unlucky, but his ability was also limited. He had hung the title of Crown Prince for so many years, but in the end, he didn't distance himself from the other princes. Even the second prince, LV Longguang, was almost on equal footing with him. This ability was clearly very problematic. Lu Longji had never met Chu Xiu, But Eunuch Chen had a very deep impression of Chu Xiao. Seeing Chu Xiao, Eunuch Chen immediately gritted his teeth and said, "Chu Xiao. He actually dares to come here." Hearing Eunuch Chen's words, Lu Longji also looked at Chu Xiao with a gloomy expression. In fact, although Lu Longji resented Chu Xiao for handing over the evidence of him colluding with Jiang Wenyuan to the second prince, he was only angry at that time. Later on, he almost forgot about this matter. But this time, Chu Xiao had ruined his plans in the southwest, and this made Lu Longji hate him to the bone. So when he saw Chu Xiao this time, Lu Longji directly walked over with a gloomy expression. Everyone present looked at Chu Xiao as if they were watching a show. Although the pugilistic world and the imperial court were often opposed to each other, in the territory of Eastern Qi, there was no need to say what the crown prince of Eastern Qi represented. This Chu Xiao was probably in trouble. Feng Qishao didn't know what Chu Xiao had done in the southwest. He only looked at Chu Xiao with a dumbfounded expression. What was going on? This fellow had even offended the crown prince of Eastern Qi? Lu Longji said with a gloomy expression, "Chu Xiao, I've already let bygones be bygones for what you did last time, and I didn't come looking for trouble with you. But who would have thought that you would challenge my bottom line again and again? Do you really think that I'm easy to bully?" Chu Xiao said calmly, "Your Highness, you're wrong. Aren't Li Yuan and Eunuch Chen your subordinates? Why didn't you say so when they came looking for trouble with me at the Luo family? I, Chu Xiao, am not someone who can be trampled on. I only believe in one principle, and that is, if someone slaps me once, I will return it 10 times. Lu Longji laughed coldly and said, Good, good, good. You are unyielding, Chu Xiao. But I want to see how unyielding you, Chu Xiao, can be." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Longji wanted his subordinates to attack Chu Xiao. If Chu Xiao was still with the second prince, or he was out of Eastern Qi, Lu Longji really couldn't attack Chu Xiao. But now Chu Xiao was alone. What was there for Lu Longji to be afraid of? Even if someone said that Lu Longji was stingy and deliberately retaliated, Lu Longji wanted to vent his anger today. But at this moment, a faint voice came from behind Lu Longji. "Your Highness, His Majesty asked us to come here today to welcome Master Tam Yuan. How can you attack here? I don't care about the personal grievances between you and Chu Xiao in other places, but today, His Highness can't attack here." Xiao Baiyu, dressed in white, stood in the crowd of the crown prince. As soon as he spoke, those who were about to attack all stopped there. They knew Xiao Baiyu's position in Eastern Qi, and his words were more effective than the crown prince's. Lu Longji's face darkened, and he frowned. "Your Excellency, I know it's not appropriate to welcome Master Tam Yuan to see blood, but I don't have to kill Chu Xiao today. I just want to teach him a lesson." Xiao Baiyu shook his head and said, "No means no. If your Highness wants to attack, I won't stop you, but I will report what happened today to His Majesty." Hearing this, Lu Longji immediately became a little listless. Xiao Baiyu's position in Eastern Qi was not ordinary. Because of this, he actually didn't take sides in the succession of the throne. Even if this time the second prince used a favor to ask Xiao Baiyu to help him temporarily, it was just a help, and it had nothing to do with the choice of the throne. Therefore, the Emperor of Eastern Qi, Lu Haochong, trusted Xiao Baiyu very much. If Xiao Baiyu spoke ill of the crown prince in front of Lu Haochong, it was more effective than 100 words from others. Lu Longji glared at Chu Xiao fiercely, and directly turned to leave with his people. Since Xiao Baiyu came forward to protect Chu Xiao, he dared not offend Xiao Baiyu because of this, which was not worth the loss. After the crown prince left, Chu Xiao cupped his hands to Xiao Baiyu and said, "Thank you for your help, Grand Chancellor." Xiao Baiyu looked at Chu Xiao, shook his head and said, "You're welcome. I just returned the favor." Xiao Baiyu looked at Chu Xiao and was a little speechless. It was the first time for him to see such a murderous young man. It was a miracle in Jianghu that Chu Xiao could go all the way to the present without being killed halfway. Of course, at this time, Chu Xiao also felt a little strange when he looked at Xiao Baiyu, because he found that Jixia Grand Chancellor seemed to owe favors everywhere. Last time, Xiao Baiyu saved Yan Tingting from him because he owed Yan Huainan a favor. And this time, Xiao Baiyu helped him because he owed a favor to a Wu Dao Grand Master on the side of the second prince. Favors were the most difficult to return. For example, Xiao Baiyu now. As long as someone asked, unless he had decided to be shameless, he must return the favor. Therefore in Jianghu, Chu Xiu rarely owed favors. Most of the time, he let others owe him favors. Xiao Baiyu sighed and said, I heard about the Luo family. How is Fei Hong now? Luo Fei Hong was not only a member of the Luo family of Wujuan, but also a disciple of Jixia Academy. It could even be said that she was one of the most outstanding disciples that Xiao Baiyu had seen since he was in charge of Jixia Academy for so many years. Although Luo Fei Hong was a woman, Xiao Baiyu knew that as long as Luo Fei Hong was given time, she would definitely grow to a point that shocked everyone in the future. Unfortunately, the Luo family did not have Xiao Baiyu's vision, and they did not believe in Xiao Baiyu's vision. They would rather marry Luo Fei Hong in exchange for immediate benefits than to cultivate Luo Fei Hong with all their efforts and bet on their future. Xiao Baiyu wanted to save Luo Fei Hong, but unfortunately, he was the Grand Chancellor of Jixia Academy. His every move represented Jixia Academy, and Jixia Academy belonged to the imperial court. After all, the Luo family of Wujuan was one of the 9 great families. One was in Jianghu, while the other was in the imperial court. It was a little sensitive for Xiao Baiyu to show up without authorization. Therefore, Xiao Baiyu was going to wait until Luo Fei Hong married into the Ying family, and then he would ask the Ying family to let Luo Fei Hong come back. He also had some friendship with the Ying family in Shangshui. However, he did not expect that Luo Fei Hong would humiliate the Luo family on the day of the contest for marriage by fighting with Chu Xiu and others, which was somewhat unexpected. Chapter 464. Knowing that Luo Fei Hong was no longer in danger, Xiao Baiyu breathed a sigh of relief and said, maybe this is also a good home for Fei Hong. The Luo family has restrained him too much. At this time, Fei Hong is the real Fei Hong. After that, Xiao Baiyu also returned to the imperial court. After all, he also came on behalf of the imperial court this time. It was not good to stay with Chu Xiu for too long. Feng Qishao came up and said, are you familiar with Xiao Baiyu of Jixia Learning Palace? This person is really a character. The Lord of Sword King City said that Xiao Baiyu alone is equivalent to a sect. Chu Xiu nodded. He knew what the Lord of Sword King City meant. Some people could practice but not teach. Teaching disciples also required skills. Obviously, Xiao Baiyu's skills in teaching disciples were very strong. However, after Feng Qishao finished speaking, he raised his head proudly and said, but teaching disciples also depends on the person. Real geniuses don't need to be taught. Just like me. If hard work is useful, what's the use of geniuses? Chu Xiu glanced at Feng Qishao. This guy's swordsmanship was so good that even the 4 major sword halls in Sword King City could not teach him. He was indeed a genius. Of course, with his mouth, if he was not a genius, Sword King City would have expelled him from the sect immediately. At this moment, Feng Qishao's expression suddenly became a little serious. He poked Chu Xiu and said, Brother Chu, there's a guy who is not easy to deal with. I guess you'll be in trouble again. I used to have a good impression of monks, but since I met this guy, I hate baldies very much. Chu Xiu followed Feng Qishao's gaze and saw another group of people in the distance. Although there were only a dozen people, Buddhist monks bowed their heads to them wherever they passed. In fact, there should have been 2 groups of people. Among the dozen or so people, only one was a young man. The others were all old monks. They were all wearing loose gray Zen robes. They didn't have kasayas, and they seemed very casual. These monks were generally older, and their strength was not weak. The weakest among them was at the unity of nature state, and the 2 leaders were actually martial Tao masters of the real pellet state. These old monks were from the South Buddhist sect Sabodhi Monastery. Compared to the Great Light Temple, the Sabodhi Monastery was much more low-key. The Temple of Great Light trained their physique, while the Sabodhi Zen Monastery trained their dharma. Therefore, the Sabodhi Zen Monastery had stricter requirements for their disciples. Only when their attainments in dharma had reached an extremely profound realm would they be considered an official disciple of the Sabodhi Zen Monastery. Therefore, after all these years, the number of people in the Sabodhi Monastery never exceeded 1,000, but there was not a single mediocre person. This time, Sabodhi Zen Monastery sent 2 martial Tao grandmasters to welcome Master Tan Yuan, which could be considered as giving him a lot of face. Although only 1 person from the Great Light Temple came, this person's weight was no less than the dozen people from the Sabodhi Monastery. This was because the person who came was the most outstanding disciple of the Great Light Temple of this generation. He was known as the genius of the Great Light Temple in thousands of years, the second on the Longhu list, Wisdom King Zongxian. This was the first time Chu Xiu had seen this famous genius of the Longhu list. Compared with Feng Qi, this Wisdom King Zongxian was more handsome than Feng Qi. This Wisdom King Zongxian, who was famous in the Jianghu, looked very young. He was not very handsome, but he was extremely masculine. His face and body, every contour seemed to be chiseled and chiseled. In particular, Zongxian's eyes contained a Buddhist light, as if he was really a Buddha from heaven. It made people unable to see any emotions hidden behind the Buddhist light, as if he was really a walking statue of Buddha. Zongxian's attire was also very strange. He only wore a pair of monk's pants, and his upper body was bare. The color of his muscles looked like they were cast from brass or gold. The strangest thing was the huge prayer beads hanging around his neck. Each prayer bead was as big as a baby's head, and all sorts of Sanskrit were written on them. It looked very mystical. Feng Qi's expression was serious, which was rare for him. He said, "This guy is a freak. I suspect he doesn't have any emotions at all. How did the Great Light Temple cultivate such a monster? In any case, I really don't like this guy. It seems like you've offended quite a number of monks. I have a feeling that this guy, Zongxian, will come looking for trouble with you. You'd better pray for yourself. Monsters can only be dealt with by monsters. In the Jianghu, the only person who can deal with a monster like Zongxian is that guy, Zhang Qingzhen. That guy is also a monster. Have you ever seen a normal person born with tattoos?" After saying that, Feng Qi even moved to the side silently. This surprised Chu Xiu. This was the first time he had seen an existence that could make someone like Feng Qi so fearful. Feng Qi was ranked third on the Longhu leaderboard, while Zongxian was ranked second. No one knew if the two of them had fought before. However, looking at Feng Qi's reaction, he should have fought with Zongxian before and even suffered some losses. Otherwise, he would not have been so fearful of Zongxian. Zongxian looked in the direction where Feng Qi and Chu Xiu were. Of course, he was mainly looking at Feng Qi. His eyes were covered by a layer of Buddhist light, and the expression on his face was like a statue. There was no change at all, so no one could read any information from his eyes, be it kindness or malice. "Feng Qi, you're here too," Zongxian said calmly. Zongxian said faintly. His voice was hoarse, like metal rubbing against metal. However, his tone was extremely calm and no emotions could be heard from it. Feng Qi snorted coldly and said, "Why? Can't I come?" Zongxian did not say anything else. He was not here to find trouble with Feng Qi, but to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the Great Light Temple. With his personality, he would not be able to distinguish between good and evil. It was only because Feng Qi had fought with him before, and Feng Qi's strength had gained his recognition that he took the initiative to greet Feng Qi. There was no special meaning to it. It was just out of etiquette, and it was etiquette that Zongxian himself thought was etiquette. At that moment, a Buddhist sect warrior suddenly pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "Masters of Sabodhi Zen Monastery and senior brother Zongxian, this Chu Xiu has insulted our Buddhist sect. He said that we only read Buddhist scriptures and do not do good deeds, and that we are hypocritical. We are not strong enough, so we dare not argue with him. Now that Masters and senior brother Zongxian are here, please seek justice for our Buddhist sect." Upon hearing this, the disciples who were not from the Buddhist sect raised their eyebrows. Another complaint? This was what the Buddhist sect was good at. Actually, compared to the Taoist sect, most of the Buddhist sects were more united, other than the Zen sect and the Tantric sect, which had some differences and conflicts between them. A small monastery would invite a monk from a big monastery to preach, while a monk from a big monastery would invite a monk from a small monastery to attend the ceremony. This was very normal. Therefore, it was widely recognized in the underworld that Buddhist sect warriors were not to be trifled with. If you offended a monk from a small monastery, who knew what kind of people would be involved in the aftermath? The reason why Chu Xiu had a grudge with the Great Light Temple was actually because of this situation. It was because he had killed Zen Master Hang Shan during his mission, which resulted in so much hatred. On the other hand, the Taoist sect was much more normal. You cultivate your Dharma, and I comprehend my Tao. The Taoist sect had 3,000 Dharma, and everyone did their own thing. Everyone did not interfere with each other, and there were not many implications. Anyway, as long as one sect was not destroyed, the orthodoxy would not be destroyed. What was the point of doing so many useless things? Therefore, in comparison, the people of the underworld were somewhat dissatisfied with the Buddhist sect's tradition. They thought that the Buddhist sect was too protective of their own. Now that the Buddhist sect disciple had come out to complain, this also made the eyes of Sabodhi Zen Monastery and Zongxian look at Chu Xiao. The few old monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery frowned. They were all older generations of underworld warriors, so they did not pay much attention to the new generation of underworld elites like Chu Xiao. However, the high monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery were good at maintaining their composure, so they did not need to be overly entangled with a junior warrior like Chu Xiao. Moreover, they were here to welcome Master Tam Yuan. If they were to make a move now, they would be ruining the Buddhist sect's own reputation. Therefore, these few monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery did not question Chu Xiao or anything. Instead, they glared at the monk who had complained, signaling him not to cause trouble. However, at that moment, Zongxian suddenly said, "You're Chu Xiao?" The Chu Xiao who killed the Great Light Temple's Vajra Monastery disciple and consecutively defeated several Great Light Temple disciples on Floating Jade Mountain? Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "Why? You want to seek justice for them? The Great Light Temple sure has many talents. If one couldn't win, then a second one came. In the end, even Wisdom King Zongxian, whose name has shaken the underworld, showed up. I'm very curious who will come next." Zongxian's tone did not contain any emotion. He only said in a narrating tone, "Justice is fought for by oneself, not by others. Even if they beg me, I won't help them. However, I'm a disciple of the Great Light Temple, so I can't just watch my fellow disciples suffer. This isn't seeking justice, it's just a formality." As soon as he said that, before anyone could react, Zongxian suddenly moved. Strong winds howled, and the ground collapsed. His entire body shone with Buddhist light, and the Wisdom King's seal fell. It was as if he really had the might of a Wisdom King descending into the world, shocking the world. Zongxian's sudden attack was something that Chu Xiao did not expect, and it was something that no one present had expected as well. It was too sudden. Zongxian's way of thinking seemed to be somewhat different from normal people. Any rules or things like face were useless to him. He simply used his own way of thinking to deal with any problem without any emotion. Just like what Feng Qishao said, this person was a freak. It was clear that he did not want to seek justice for his fellow disciples of the Great Light Temple, but because he was a disciple of the Great Light Temple, he had to attack Chu Xiao as a matter of routine. It had nothing to do with his reputation, but he was unusually decisive. Chapter 465. Zongxian held the Akalanatha seal in his hand. In Chu Xiao's eyes, the power was so strong that it was infinitely close to the level of a martial Dao master. It even gave him the illusion that he was fighting Nie Renlong from the past. People like Zongxian had a strange way of thinking. If he was weak, he would be the standard lunatic, and no one would care about him. However, if he had Zongxian's strength, then it was just like what Feng Qishao said, he was a freak. There was no other way but to stay away from him. However, now that Zongxian had made his move, Chu Xiao could not hide even if he wanted to. Under the Akalanatha seal, the sun, moon, and stars wheel in Chu Xiao's eyes rotated. He performed the heaven-sun gazing at air skill to the extreme, but it was still useless. Zongxian's power was so strong that he could seal all the space around Chu Xiao to dodge. He was like a real Akalanatha. Under the extreme power, Chu Xiao could not dodge and could only choose to take it head-on. Squinting, Chu Xiao's body emitted a terrifying demonic aura and murderous aura. He performed the Avicii Three Sabers saber intent to the extreme. When the saber slashed out, it was like the gates of hell had opened. The power was extremely terrifying. The blood-refined divine aura seemed to have condensed into a substance, turning into a sharp blade that condensed on the saber. Zongxian's Akalanatha seal was the incarnation of the Akalanatha, while Chu Xiao's demonic saber was the sacrifice to become a demon. Only when facing a martial Dao master would Chu Xiao explode with this level of power. Apart from burning his blood essence, this was the peak of Chu Xiao's power. Zongxian was not a martial Dao grandmaster, but the pressure he brought to Chu Xiao was not inferior to a martial Dao grandmaster. As the bright ruler seal clashed with Chu Xiu's demonic blade, an extremely powerful force suddenly burst forth. Chu Xiu's demonic blade, which seemed to be extremely powerful, actually shattered inch by inch under the bright ruler seal. The demonic chi was melted, and the refined blood divine shield was suppressed. The bright ruler seal, which was not considered a top-notch technique in the Great Radiance Temple, was used by Zhongxian to the acme of perfection. As the seal landed, there was even the sound of Buddha's voice descending, and the bright ruler's angry roar rang out. Under the powerful storm of stellar energy, everyone in the vicinity dodged to the side. Even Feng Qishao. He put away the mischievous smile on his face and his expression became extremely solemn. He had experienced Zhongxian's power before. Although it was not a battle of life and death, he was the one at a disadvantage. Even if Feng Qishao gave it his all, he was not confident that he could defeat Zhongxian. Seventh young Master Feng's karma swordsmanship could be said to be unparalleled. Not to mention martial artists of the same level, even many martial Dao grandmasters and powerhouses of the true fire spirit refinement state in the pugilistic world could not successfully comprehend it. However, the karma swordsmanship was not invincible. At the very least, when he was fighting Zhongxian, Feng Qishao was completely suppressed by Zhongxian. It was a complete suppression in terms of power. The karma swordsmanship had a cause and effect. Feng Qishao's sword had indeed stabbed Zhongxian, but his sword could not hurt Zhongxian. This was undoubtedly a terrifying thing, which was why Feng Qishao thought that Zhongxian was a freak. Now that he saw Zhongxian again, Feng Qishao did not feel that Zhongxian's strength had improved significantly. However, Chu Xiu surprised him a little. Previously, when Chu Xiu fought with Feng Qishao on Floating Jade Mountain, Chu Xiu had only displayed his equally mysterious karma swordsmanship. It was only now that Feng Qishao realized that Chu Xiu's power was also extremely terrifying in a head-on confrontation. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu's opponent was Zhongxian, an existence that even Feng Qishao called a freak. In the fierce collision, Chu Xiu's demon saber collapsed, and he could not help but retreat step by step. With every step he took, the ground under his feet would explode and form a pit that was several feet wide. After retreating more than 10 steps, Chu Xiu's face turned pale, and even his internal organs could not withstand the powerful force. It was an extremely pure and powerful force. Zhongxian's expression did not change at all, but the Buddhist light in his eyes grew stronger. He stared at Chu Xiu, and his movements paused for a moment. This might be Zhongxian's expression of surprise. He was surprised that Chu Xiu could actually block his seal. However, Zhongxian dropped another seal. This time, the Buddhist light that filled the sky condensed into a Dharma idol that appeared behind Zhongxian. It was surrounded by Buddhist flames, and it glared angrily. The angry Akalanatha seal. The Buddhist light burned the world, and as the angry Akalanatha seal fell, the surrounding air began to ripple. The chi of heaven and earth was stirred up, and this overbearing force could not tolerate any foreign things. Chu Xiu roared angrily, and a powerful aura emerged from his body. All the gang chi condensed into one, and he was as immovable as a mountain, invincible. Under the Dugu seal, the stellar energy shield around Chu Xiu's body seemed to have condensed into a solid form. However, under the enraged Akala seal, the stellar energy shield shattered with a loud bang. It did not even manage to resist for a breath of time. However, at the moment when the Gang Chi shield shattered, all the killing intent around Chu Xiu condensed to the extreme, and even the last trace of clarity in his mind was swallowed by the boundless killing intent. There was nothing in the world that could not be killed. When the killing intent reached a crazy level, and even to the point of forgetting oneself, this was the real oblivious killing fist. The might of that punch was too extreme. So, ever since Chu Xiu had obtained the sky-decimating earth-extinguishing oblivion killing fist, he had never unleashed the might of that move to such a pinnacle degree. And now, Zhongxian had successfully forced Chu Xiu to use that punch. The fists collided, and the boundless killing intent and the Buddhist light seal suddenly scattered. The ground under their feet began to crack inch by inch, and even stretched for hundreds of feet. Looking at a small area, it looked like an earth dragon turning over. In the Gang Chi storm caused by the collision, Chu Xiu's figure retreated step by step, and the crazy killing intent in his eyes was dispelled because his power was almost exhausted. A strand of blood flowed from Chu Xiu's mouth as he looked at Zhongxian with a trace of astonishment in his eyes. Power. Zhongxian was only good at power, so in this aspect, Zhongxian had even surpassed some martial Dao masters. All along, Chu Xiao had been using power to crush others, and now it was finally someone else's turn to use power to crush him. This feeling was indeed a little unpleasant. On the other side, Zhongxian raised his right hand, and the Buddhist light in his eyes was a little dimmer than before. On his right hand, the skin that seemed to be cast with steel had cracks at this time, as if it had been cut by a net of knives. That was caused by Chu Xiaotian's despair annihilation's selfless killing fist. When the killing intent reached the extreme, it would be sharper than the edge of a knife. Under that punch, Chu Xiao vomited blood, and Zhongxian suffered some superficial injuries. At first glance, it seemed that Chu Xiao was defeated, but he did not suffer a loss, because his opponent was Zhongxian, who was one realm higher than him, so Chu Xiao's defeat was not shameful. The warriors present who were a little dissatisfied with Chu Xiao did not see anything wrong with Zhongxian at this time. They only saw that Zhongxian made Chu Xiao vomit blood with 2 moves. This guy was so arrogant before, but now he had seen his power, right? At this moment, Xiao Baiyu frowned and said, Zhongxian, that's enough. Since you are here to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the Great Light Temple, you are losing the face of your Buddhism by fighting here. The expression on Zhongxian's face did not change at all, but he did not continue to fight. 2 bright king seals are enough. I didn't want to fight again, otherwise, you can't stop me. Zhongxian's words were very arrogant, but his expression when looking at Xiao Baiyu was still the same, without the slightest change, as if he was just stating a fact. Xiao Baiyu was not angry. He was still very tolerant, especially because he knew that what Zhongxian said was likely to be a fact. Whether in Jianghu or in the Eastern Qi imperial court, Xiao Baiyu was not famous for his absolute strength. He was famous only because of his insights on martial arts and his identity as the chancellor of Jixia Academy. In fact, if they really fought, Xiao Baiyu would definitely not be defeated, but he could not stop Zhongxian from fighting with Chu Xiao. After that, Zhongxian walked straight back and looked in the direction of Donghai. Even if there were other Buddhist disciples around him who greeted him, Zhongxian seemed not to hear them. Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows, threw an elixir into his mouth, and chewed it casually as if he were chewing candy. His internal organs suffered some minor injuries, but they were not too serious. Chu Xiao was not a sore loser. Zhongxian's strength was indeed very strong. Chu Xiao suspected that Zhongxian now had the strength to challenge a Wu Dao Grand Master. Although he was defeated by Zhongxian in 2 moves, Chu Xiao was not depressed. Zhongxian hadn't used his full strength, and neither had Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao had only lost to Zhongxian in terms of pure strength, and Chu Xiao wasn't only good at brute force. Of course, the most important thing was that Chu Xiao was still in the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, while Zhongxian had reached the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. Although the oneness of heaven and human beings realm was only 1 realm lower than the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, it was a world of difference for the current Chu Xiao. Once he stepped into the oneness of heaven and human beings realm, Chu Xiao's strength would definitely skyrocket. At that time, although it would still be hard to tell who would win between him and Zhongxian, at least Chu Xiao would not be defeated so easily. Moreover, Chu Xiao was not too far away from this realm. He only needed an opportunity to step into the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. At that moment, Feng Qishao sneaked back to Chu Xiao's side and said in a low voice, I've said it before. This guy is a freak. His martial arts are stubborn, and he's also extremely stubborn when it comes to doing things. I'm very curious if the Great Light Temple will let such a person become the abbot in the future. Qu'est-ce? That scene is simply unimaginable. Chu Xiao glanced at Feng Qishao. If Sword King City dared to choose someone like him as the successor to take over Sword King City in the future, why couldn't Zhongxian become the successor of the Great Light Temple's abbot in the future? Even someone like Feng Qishao dared to mock Zhongxian. One could imagine how good this guy felt about himself. Chapter 466. Feng Qishao kept nagging in Chu Xiao's ear. This person's chatterbox was definitely a kind of illness. It was as if he would suffocate to death if he didn't speak for a day. Chu Xiao was also annoyed by his nagging, so he suddenly said, I have seen Zhongxian's strength. It is indeed terrifying. Now I am not as good as him. What about Zhang Chengjin, who is ranked first on the Longhu list? Have you ever fought with him? Did you win or lose? Feng Qishao was suddenly stunned by Chu Xiao's question, and then his expression became listless. He snorted and said, Anyway, they are all monsters. However, that guy Zhang Qingzhen is easier to talk to than Zhong Xian. Like Zhong Xian, it is impossible to communicate with him at all. Chu Xiu did not speak. He looked at Fang Qi Xiao's expression and knew that he should have fought with Zhang Qingzhen, or rather they had learned from each other. Moreover, he had lost, and lost very badly. Otherwise, if he could take advantage of him, with Fang Qi Xiao's character, he would be able to boast about it. Speaking of Zhang Qingzhen, Chu Xiu also seemed to have noticed that this time, when they came to welcome Master Tam Yuan, there was not even a martial artist from the 4 major Taoist sects present, let alone the people from the 4 major Taoist sects. However, when he thought about it, it was normal. After all, Master Tam Yuan was a Buddhist holy monk. The contradiction between Taoism and Buddhism had always existed. Even if Master Tam Yuan was now a famous Buddhist holy monk in Jianghu, no one from the Taoist sects would come to welcome him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be destroying their prestige? Therefore, for this matter, the Taoist sects simply pretended not to know anything. From the beginning, not even a single person came. Just as everyone was waiting bitterly on the dragon-facing beach, a huge ship broke through the waves in the distance. There was even a lifelike giant whale embroidered on the sail. The giant whale was the symbol of the Cetacean Society, the largest chamber of commerce among the dozens of islands in the Eastern Sea. The Cetacean Society traveled between Eastern Qi and the Eastern Sea. Although it was not the most powerful force in the Eastern Sea, it was the most financially powerful chamber of commerce. At this moment, on the bow of the giant ship, an old monk stared at a piece of land that looked like a black line. His eyes revealed a complicated and nostalgic expression. This old monk was really old. His eyebrows and beard were already gray, and the wrinkles on his face looked like they could squash a fly. He was wearing an ordinary gray monk's robe, which was also patched up. The only thing on his body that was relatively eye-catching was the string of Buddhist beads hanging around his neck. The surface was incomparably brilliant, and the Buddha's aura was naturally produced. At first glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. This old monk was the famous Vedanta of the Buddhist sect, who was regarded as a Buddha by the entire Eastern Sea, holy monk Tan Yuan. At this moment, looking at the land of Eastern Qi, Master Tam Yuan's heart was stirred. There were countless emotions in his heart, but in the end, they all turned into a long sigh. He left home when he was young and returned when he was old. When Master Tam Yuan left Eastern Qi, he was not young anymore. When he returned, he was not old, but he was already dying. In fact, Master Tam Yuan was not too old. He had just passed 100 years this year. A martial Tao master's lifespan was 300 years. Even if Master Tam Yuan had only stayed in the true fire spirit refinement state for a day, it was not a problem for him to maintain the 300 years of lifespan of a martial Tao master. However, it was a pity that Master Tam Yuan had been spreading Buddhism in the Eastern Sea all these years, dispelling hostility and hatred. He had also fought with many people, and sometimes he even fought against a large force alone. For a long time, his body was full of internal injuries. Although he still retained the strength of a martial Tao master, his lifespan was close to exhaustion. Master Tan Yuan was a martial Tao grandmaster, yet he ended up in such a state. In the eyes of outsiders, it didn't seem worth it, but in Master Tan Yuan's eyes, he had never regretted it. There must be something in life that was worth persevering for. In the past, when Master Tam Yuan was middle-aged, he went overseas to spread Buddhism and dispelled hostility and hatred. At that time, even Master Tam Yuan himself was very confused. A person had 100 years of life, and the first half of Master Tam Yuan's life was very mediocre. His martial arts aptitude was mediocre, and his Buddhism aptitude was mediocre. He was born in a small temple, and perhaps he would spend the rest of his life like that. But for some reason, even Master Tan Yuan himself did not know why he had suddenly come up with the idea of crossing the sea east back then. Perhaps it was a moment of impulse, or perhaps it was a thought that he had hidden deep in his heart for many years. Now that several decades had passed, although the overseas region had yet to be completely bathed in the Buddhist Dharma, there were already temples of various sizes built. Originally, the various islands would fight to the death because of the conflict of interests, and many of the enmity had been resolved by him. Monk Tan Yuan, who was unknown in the past, had also become the current holy monk Tan Yuan. Lowering his head and sighing, Master Tam Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and played with it. This was something given to him by his good friend, Taoist Tian Shu of the East Sea Ling Ao Island, to help him find a disciple. In fact, when it came to martial arts, Master Tam Yuan was not too obsessed. Martial arts was the way to stop war. It was not that Master Tam Yuan had not killed people before, but the number of people he had saved was 10 times or even 1,000 times more than the number of people he had killed. Therefore, when he was in the East Sea, Master Tam Yuan had not had the time to find a disciple. It was only now that he realized that he did not have much lifespan left, that he had the idea of looking for a successor. With Master Tam Yuan's reputation in the East Sea, it was very easy for him to find a disciple, but unfortunately, he was not satisfied with any of these people. Master Tam Yuan did not have high requirements for a disciple. It did not matter if the other party was not a monk, they could be a disciple of another sect, or even a Taoist priest. However, Master Tam Yuan's only hope was that his martial arts could be used to save people, not to kill. Good and evil were not things that could be seen just by looking at one's reputation and appearance. Sometimes, a great evil person's benevolence could save thousands of people. As for the young martial artists in the East Sea, Master Tam Yuan could only see their dedication to martial arts, and the so-called good and evil were put at the end. Therefore this time, Master Tam Yuan was prepared to return to his roots in the Central Plains and choose a disciple at the same time. Unfortunately, there was not much time left for him. Therefore, even though the Central Plains was a place of outstanding people, there was not much time left for him to choose a test. Therefore, Tan Yuan asked Taoist Tian Shu for such a jade slip. Tian Shu Taoist was a rogue cultivator in the East Sea on Ling Ao Island. He was very famous. Although he had the cultivation of a martial arts grandmaster, he was really famous for his divination skills. It was strange for a monk to become friends with a Taoist priest, but Master Tam Yuan and Tian Shu Taoist were good friends. They exchanged and chatted together, and never had any differences between Taoism and Buddhism. You are you, Buddhism is Buddhism, and Taoism is Taoism. They had no relationship, so it could be said that they could see through each other very clearly. Knowing that his old friend did not have long to live, Tian Shu Taoist was also very sad. Therefore, he used his strongest power to divine a disciple who met Master Tam Yuan's requirements, and gave him 4 comments. Every road is covered by a canopy, and it is difficult to guard a hidden dragon's heart. The finishing touch gathers the wind and clouds, like a moth darting into a flame, to turn the tide. The meaning of the comments was very obvious. This time, the disciple that Master Tam Yuan wanted should be from the imperial court. The word official was covered by a canopy, and as long as it was an official, it meant that the disciple was from the imperial court. This time, when Master Tam Yuan stepped into the Central Plains, he would definitely meet a martial artist from the imperial court. The hidden dragon's heart was difficult to guard. A hidden dragon's heart referred to the fact that the other party was still a hidden dragon, and he was not famous. Even he did not know where his future was. The finishing touch gathers the wind and clouds referred to Master Tam Yuan himself. He passed the cultivation method to the other party, just like the finishing touch, and gave the other party the strength to gather the wind and clouds, and laugh at the world. And finally, like a moth darting into a flame to turn the tide, it meant that the other party would be like a moth darting into a flame in the future, and save thousands of people like a moth darting into a flame. Moreover, Tian Shu Taoist was afraid that the comments were a little vague, which would cause Master Tam Yuan to choose the wrong person. Therefore, Tian Shu Taoist exchanged a mouthful of his essence and blood for a vague heaven secret, and sealed it in the jade slip. As long as Master Tam Yuan met the person related to the comments, the jade slip would shine, and it was a double guarantee that there would be no mistakes. If Chu Xiao were here, he would almost understand why Master Tam Yuan finally chose Li Yuan. This was cause and effect and also fate. Li Yuan was from the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. This time, if he did not die, he would definitely follow the Crown Prince to welcome Master Tam Yuan. In this way he would meet the first condition. Li Yuan was not famous, and he was naturally a little confused about his future, which was also in line with the second condition. The last 2 conditions referred to Li Yuan's future. After receiving the inheritance of Master Tam Yuan, he was indeed like the finishing touch, and completely gathered the wind and clouds, and soared to the sky. And the last condition referred to Li Yuan, when Eastern Qi was weak and in danger, like a moth darting into a flame. He fought against the Northern Yan like a moth darting into a flame, and finally turned the tide, and became the Northern Zhenbei King and General of Eastern Qi. The reason why Tian Shu Taoist predicted that the disciple was Li Yuan who was also stained with blood in the late stage, was because of cause and effect. Karma was a very mysterious thing. Even if it was good or evil, it couldn't be used to distinguish the cause and effect. Sometimes, doing a good deed could lead to greater evil. Sometimes, killing a person could save more people. If Li Yuan did not turn the tide for Eastern Qi in the future, the Northern Yen would definitely break through Eastern Qi. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, and Eastern Qi, which was located in the hinterland of the Central Plains, was naturally not that easy to destroy. It would definitely fight with the Northern Yen to the end, and at that time, West Chu would definitely intervene, taking advantage of the chaos. In this way, the war between the three countries would repeat, and rivers of blood would flow in the world. If Li Yuan turned the tide, he could make the Northern Yen retreat, and control the war to a certain extent, not giving West Chu a chance to intervene. In this way, although there would be casualties, there would undoubtedly be more people alive. However, no matter what, Li Yuan's existence had reduced the number of killings in the three kingdoms. Although he had killed a lot of people, he had also indirectly saved thousands of people. Therefore, in Tianshu Taoists' deduction, Li Yuan was undoubtedly the one who met the requirements. Chapter 467. While everyone on the shore was waiting anxiously, the Cetacean Society's warship was about to reach the shore. At this time, a well-dressed middle-aged man walked behind Master Tam Yuan and whispered, "Master, we're almost there." Master Tam Yuan turned around and smiled. "Master Long, sorry to trouble you." The middle-aged man hurriedly said, "Master, please don't say that. If it weren't for you in the past, the Cetacean Society would have been annexed by the East China Sea's 3 evil islands. Master Long has been protecting the East China Sea all these years, reducing the number of killings in the East China Sea. It's a pity that good people don't live long. Now that you're leaving, I'm afraid the East China Sea won't have many peaceful days." At this point, the middle-aged man's eyes turned red and he looked sad. This middle-aged man was the Cetacean Society's leader, Long Tianying. He was considered a figure in the East China Sea. However, a businessman was a businessman after all. Even if he had some strength, it was quite difficult for him to develop the Cetacean Society to such a level. Thanks to Master Tam Yuan's protection in the past, the Cetacean Society was able to develop to its current scale. Therefore, Long Tianying was really sad that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away. Master Tam Yuan smiled and said, "Master Long, you don't have to be like this. Life and death are fated. This is the cycle of reincarnation. It can't be changed. Whether good or bad, they can't escape this. However, the East China Sea's order has been established. As long as everyone can abide by the rules and not kill the innocent, the East China Sea will still be the East China Sea. It's the same principle with or without this old monk." Long Tianying nodded. However, he knew that the East China Sea didn't have a respected expert like Master Tam Yuan to maintain order. It was estimated that there wouldn't be many peaceful days left. By then, the Cetacean Society's warship had reached the shore. Master Tam Yuan took a step forward and hovered in the air. The surrounding power of heaven and earth gently lifted Master Tam Yuan's body, allowing him to gently land on the shore. When everyone present saw this, they rushed forward and said loudly, "Welcome back to the Central Plains." At this moment, whether it was the Crown Prince and Xiao Baiyu who represented the imperial court, the 2 Wu Dao Grand Masters of Sabodi Zen Monastery, or Wisdom King Zhongshuan, they all lowered their heads. Whether it was true or false, the current Master Tam Yuan was worthy of their respect. Master Tam Yuan waved his hand and said, "Everyone, there's no need to be like this. What holy monk? They're all mortals. Who has the qualifications to become a god or a saint? At the very least, I, this old monk, am not worthy of her. This time, I've returned to the Central Plains because I want to find a lonely grave in my hometown to bury. It can be considered as returning to my roots. I've offended all of you by making such a big fuss." To be able to be a monk to the level of Master Tam Yuan was considered to have reached the extreme. Martial artists from other small temples were not qualified to be welcomed by the people of Sabodi Zen Monastery and Great Light Temple. At this moment, a Wu Dao Grand Master of Sabodi Zen Monastery stood up and bowed. "Senior Brother Tam Yuan, the abbot has instructed before he came that he wants to invite Senior Brother Tam Yuan to Sabodi Zen Monastery as a guest to preach. Therefore, Please come with us. Our Sabodhi Zen monastery will definitely entertain you. He could not tell who was the senior between the monk from Sabodhi Zen monastery and Tam Yuan. However, with Master Tam Yuan's current status, it would definitely not be wrong to call him senior brother. Zhongxian, who was at the side, also said, "When we came, Su Ci also instructed that we must invite Master Tam Yuan to preach at Great Light Temple." Master Tam Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I appreciate the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery's kindness, but I'll pass on this preaching. Actually, how can I preach anything? My attainments in the Dharma are definitely not as good as the eminent monks of Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery. The so-called preaching of the Dharma in the Eastern Sea is actually just explaining some superficial principles to them and reciting some Buddhist scriptures to them. I'm slow-witted, so I can't understand some of the Buddhist principles. Therefore, most of the time, I don't use the Dharma to resolve the enmity, but force. When both sides want to fight, I beat them up until they have no strength left. Then, I recite the Buddhist scriptures to them until they are really impatient. Naturally, the enmity between both sides will disappear." As soon as he said that, everyone present was stunned, especially the old monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery. How were they supposed to respond? Although it was said that violence was more effective than reasoning in a place like the Eastern Sea, Master Tam Yuan had said it so directly. This made the martial artists from Sabodhi Zen Monastery feel a little degraded. This was completely different from what they had imagined. Chu Xiao, who was at the back, felt that this Master Tam Yuan was quite understanding. Whether it was Buddhism or Taoism, people had to listen to what you said before it could be spread. If a powerless monk wanted to spread the Dharma and resolve enmity, he would most likely be killed by a knife. Actually, Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery knew this as well. Otherwise, they would not have put so much effort into martial arts. If they had the time, they would have used it to study the Dharma. However, although they knew this, they did not want to admit it. When they were outside, they still said that they were monks who were compassionate and wanted to convince people with virtue. It was very hypocritical. Seeing that the expressions of the monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery were a little off, Master Tam Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Everyone, it's not that I don't want to give you face, but I really can't walk anymore. Before I came to the Central Plains, my lifespan was already starting to run out. I'm afraid I'll die before I even reach Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery. Therefore, during this last period of time, I won't be leaving Eastern Qi. I just want to return to my roots in the land of Eastern Qi." Master Tam Yuan did not mention that he wanted to find a disciple, because once he did, the young talents of the entire pugilistic world would swarm over. By then it might cause some impact. According to the divination given to him by Taoist Tian Shu, he would definitely meet a suitable disciple when he returned to the Central Plains this time. There was no need to force it. Meanwhile, when the monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery saw that Master Tam Yuan had rejected them, they did not say anything else. Since Master Tam Yuan was unwilling, they naturally would not force him. And with Zhongxian's character, he would not say anything else. In any case, he would say whatever the abbot wanted him to say. Zhongxian had already said what the abbot wanted him to say, so at this time, Zhongxian stood at the side like a statue, not saying a word. At this time, Crown Prince LV Longji walked over and asked his subordinates to take out a few gifts. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Master Tam Yuan is unwilling to go to Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery, then you can stay in Qi for a while." Imperial Father had once said that it was an honor for the Great Qi Kingdom to have someone like Grandmaster Tan Yuan appear in the Great Qi Kingdom. Therefore, we must invite Grandmaster Tan Yuan to Great Liang City. Imperial Father will personally receive you. Father also said that when the time comes, he will personally build a temple for you in Great Liang City. He will also erect monuments for you in other places in Qi. Master Tam, you went to the east to spread Buddhism and spread the name of the Central Plains. It can be said that you are a role model for the people of Qi. Qi will never forget you. LV Longji's words made some of the martial artists who were not from Eastern Qi frown. What did he mean by this? How could Master Tam Yuan represent Eastern Qi? In fact, for people in Jianghu, the boundaries between countries were not that important. The 5 major sword sects were located in 3 different countries. Were they going to fight and kill each other? The imperial court and Jianghu were natural opposites. Moreover, some of the sects and aristocratic families had existed for thousands of years. At that time, there were no countries like Eastern Qi and Northern Yan. Master Tam Yuan was speechless by LV Longji's enthusiasm. In fact, his return to the Central Plains this time was simply to return to his roots. He wanted to find a disciple to inherit his martial arts. Everything would be perfect. Unfortunately, in Jianghu, there were some things that could not be avoided. In the past, when he traveled east alone, there wasn't even a single person to send him off. Even his fellow disciples thought that he was crazy and that he wouldn't be able to return once he left. However, compared with the time when he left, there were so many people when he came back. This made Master Tam Yuan a little uncomfortable. However, when Master Tam Yuan was about to refuse, he suddenly remembered that the disciple he was looking for was from the imperial court. This time, the Eastern Qi imperial court sent so many people to welcome him, which was in line with what Tianshu Taoist had said. LV Longji had brought a lot of people with him, nearly 100 of them. Among them, there were also many martial artists of the younger generation. However, when Master Tan Yuan glanced over, the jade slip in his arms did not shine. This also made Master Tan Yuan feel a little strange. Could it be that that person was not here? He had never doubted the jade slip. This was the secret of heaven condensed by his old friend Tianshu Taoist with a mouthful of essence and blood. It was absolutely impossible for it to be wrong. But at this moment, Chu Xiu squeezed to the front, took out a box and handed it to Master Tam Yuan, saying, "Master Tam Yuan, I am Chu Xiu. I am here to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the second prince. The second prince can't come because of something, but he asked me to bring a gift. Please don't take it to heart, Master." Seeing Chu Xiu suddenly intervene, LV Longji's face suddenly became extremely gloomy. He should have taught Chu Xiu a lesson regardless of Xiao Baiyu's face. He had not thought about why Chu Xiu would appear here before. It was not until now that he realized that Chu Xiu was here to help his second brother build his reputation. This time, it was his privilege as the crown prince to welcome Master Tam Yuan. He did not expect that his second brother did not even want to let go of this opportunity, and specially sent someone to make trouble for him. However, at this time, no one noticed that Master Tam Yuan looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in his eyes. Because when Chu Xiu approached the jade slip in his arms, it shone with a glimmer of light. Although it was only a very weak glimmer, it did shine because of Chu Xiu's approach. Chapter 468. The jade slip glowed, which meant that Master Tam Yuan had met the right person. However, Master Tam Yuan did not say anything, because he still had some doubts. The glow of the jade slip was too weak. It could only be called a glimmer, not a glow at all. Could it be that Tianshu Taoist had used the wrong words? As long as the jade slip glowed, it meant that he had met the disciple he wanted, instead of the glowing jade slip as he had imagined. At this time, Master Tam Yuan did not know that Tianshu Taoist had said that the jade slip would glow when it touched the existence related to the disciple he had predicted. If Li Yuan were here, the jade slip would definitely shine brightly, and there would be no doubt about it. But now that Li Yuan was dead, there was no one in the world who could make the jade slip shine brightly. So now, who was the closest person to Li Yuan in terms of karma? It was not even Li Yuan's parents, but Chu Xiu, who had killed Li Yuan. In this way, the jade slip glowed after touching Chu Xiu, although it was only a weak glow. Because the glow was too weak, Master Tam Yuan was not sure about Chu Xiu. He took the box from Chu Xiu and said in a low voice, "May I ask what is your official position under the second prince Chu?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Master Tam Yuan, you misunderstood. Although I am here on behalf of the second prince, I am not from the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. I am the Guanxi penal officer of the Guanzhong torture room." Hearing this, Master Tam Yuan frowned slightly. He was not from the Imperial Court? Could it be that there was something wrong with the jade slip? Moreover, Master Tam Yuan had been away from the Central Plains for decades. His impression of the Guanzhong torture room was still the time when Chu Kuanga had just become famous in Jianghu. At that time, although the Guanzhong torture room had an outstanding figure like Chu Kuanga, it was only Chu Kuanga who was famous, not the whole Guanzhong torture room. At this time, the leader of the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying, also got off the boat and stood respectfully behind Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying Cetacean Society traveled between the East Sea and the Central Plains of Eastern Qi. They were very well informed about the Central Plains during their trade. They were almost the same as the warriors of the Central Plains. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan immediately sent a voice transmission to inquire about the Guanzhong torture room and Chu Xiao. Hearing this, Long Tianying was stunned. Although he was a little puzzled as to why Master Tam Yuan wanted the news of Chu Xiao, since Master Tam Yuan asked, Long Tianying immediately told Master Tam Yuan everything he knew truthfully. After listening to it, Master Tam Yuan also frowned. After thinking about it, Chu Xiao was somewhat similar to the image in the comments, but it was also not the same. However, after thinking about it carefully, it made some sense. Lu Feng's two mouths were covered by the imperial canopy. This was the word, official. When it was mentioned, Master Tam Yuan subconsciously thought that the other party was someone from the imperial court. It should be said that this was everyone's subconscious reaction. However, now that Master Tam Yuan realized that the comments were only the word, official, and not the imperial court, it seemed that one could also be an official without being in the imperial court. For example, Chu Xiao's current position was the Guanxi penal officer, which corresponded with the word, official. As for the hidden dragon in the abyss, it was difficult to abide by the rules. Now that Chu Xiao was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, it was probably not appropriate to say that he was a hidden dragon. However, if one were to think about it carefully, although Chu Xiao was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, there was still a huge gap between him and the top 5 on the Longhu leaderboard. Although Chu Xiao was the most outstanding disciple of the Guanzhong torture room's younger generation, be it outsiders or Guanxiyu, they did not treat Chu Xiao as the successor of the Guanzhong torture room. However, some people speculated that there was a certain possibility that Chu Xiao would inherit the Guanzhong torture room. As for Zhang Qingzhen, Zhong Xian, and the rest, even from their childhood, their fates were already determined. As long as they did not die, they would be the successor of the sect leader or the abbot. They were destined to be the overlords of the pugilistic world in the future. Therefore, compared to them, the current Chu Xiao was considered a hidden dragon with an uncertain future. Master Tam Yuan pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, Chu, you are now the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room and ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard. What do you think of your future? Hearing Master Tam Yuan's question, everyone present was stunned. There were so many people waiting to invite Master Tam Yuan, and there was also the Crown Prince, LV Longji, and Zhong Xian, who was also a young talent of the Buddhist sect. In the end, Master Tam Yuan pulled Chu Xiao over to chat. What was going on? No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't tell just what virtue or ability this Chu Xiao had to be able to obtain Master Tam Yuan's favor. Could it be because of the gift that Chu Xiao had received? However, something was not right. The box had not even been opened. How could Master Tam Yuan know what was inside? Even Chu Xiao was in a daze. It was true that he was prepared to snatch Li Yuan's opportunity. Therefore, from the beginning, Chu Xiao had planned to get close to Master Tam Yuan and strike up a conversation with him. However, he did not expect Master Tam Yuan to take the initiative to talk to him. Could it be that he was really lucky and could immediately replace Li Yuan after killing him? However, after a short moment of shock, Chu Xiao immediately calmed down. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was the son of luck and that if he stood still, there would be an opportunity falling on him. Although he did not know why Master Tam Yuan asked this question, Chu Xiao subconsciously leaned towards Li Yuan's way of thinking. What should Li Yuan's future be like now? According to Chu Xiao's analysis, his future could only be described as uncertain. Although he was the son of the High Duke and the Crown Prince's confidant, the Lin Duke's residence had already declined. He was not the only confidant of the Crown Prince and he was not the most trusted person. Most importantly, the Crown Prince's future was uncertain. There was Lu Haochang who refused to give up his position and Lu Longguang who was pressuring him. Therefore, Lu Longji, the Crown Prince's future was uncertain, let alone someone who was attached to the Crown Prince. Therefore, Chu Xiao also harbored such a feeling. He sighed and said, Master Tam Yuan must be joking. How could a person of my background have any opinions? I, Chu Xiao, was born in the wilderness. My reputation in the Jianghu is mixed. I don't have the support of my sect's inheritance. Back then, I was hunted to the point where I had nowhere to go. Fortunately, I was taken in by the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, which made things a little safer. Now, I can only take one step at a time. Hearing Chu Xiao's words, everyone present subconsciously furrowed their brows. Both good and bad? Did you, Chu Xiao, have a good reputation in the pugilistic world? Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Master Tam Yuan's eyes lit up. This Chu Xiu's current state of mind was in line with the second sentence of the comment. Since he lacked an inheritance, now that Master Tam Yuan had given him an inheritance, it was the finishing touch, gathering wind and clouds. As for the last sentence of the comment that predicted the future, Master Tam Yuan also found a reason. The Guanzhong torture room was located in the land of 3 countries, and its location was extremely sensitive. In the past, Chu Xiu was able to fight against an army of 10,000 and stop the war with force. If the 3 countries were to go to war again in the future, Chu Xiu's strength would increase greatly after obtaining his inheritance. It was very likely that he would do the same thing as Chu Kuanga, or even better, stop the war between the 3 countries and save countless people. It had to be said that sometimes coincidences happened like this. What happened to Chu Xiu was only slightly similar to the comment, but Master Tam Yuan forcefully deduced 80% of it based on these clues. Coupled with the jade slip that was still emitting a faint glow, no one in the pugilistic world was more in line with Master Tam Yuan's requirements than Chu Xiu. However, Master Tam Yuan was a person who was about to die after all. He only had one chance to choose an inheritor. Although Chu Xiu was very in line with the jade slip and the comment's requirements, intuition told Master Tam Yuan that he still needed to be more cautious. However, at this moment, Master Tam Yuan's internal organs felt a sharp pain. Although he looked fine on the outside, his internal organs had already begun to turn upside down. Master Tam Yuan's lips suddenly revealed a bitter smile. It seemed that he did not even have the chance to choose carefully. His internal injuries had erupted more severely than he had imagined. Originally, Master Tam Yuan thought that he could hold on for a few months, but now it seemed that it would be difficult for him to even hold on for a few days. Master Tam Yuan cultivated Buddhist techniques. Although it was not as powerful as the Great Light Temple's body-refining techniques, it was not weak either. However, all these years, Master Tam Yuan had been constantly running around and fighting, causing the internal injuries in his body to become more and more severe. At this moment, he was already on the verge of collapse and could not hold on any longer. His body no longer gave Master Tam Yuan the chance to choose. He glanced at the jade slip that was still emitting a faint glow in his hand. Master Tam Yuan said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Chu, this time I came to the Central Plains to return to my roots. However, I do not want to bring my martial arts to the soil. Therefore, I want to find someone to pass on my martial arts so that it can save the world and save people, so that it can become a martial art for saving people, not a technique for killing people. Now, I am going to pass on all my martial arts and the last bit of my skills to you. I do not need you to be my disciple. Between us, we are just teaching, not passing on the way. Do you want to agree?" As soon as this was said, everyone present was stunned. No one had expected Master Tam Yuan to say such a thing. Everyone in the Jianghu knew that Master Tam Yuan did not have any disciples. Even the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery had so sincerely invited Master Tam Yuan to come to these 2 places to preach. In addition to building up their reputation and admiring Master Tam Yuan, they also had some ulterior motives. Since Master Tam Yuan did not have any disciples, would he leave his martial arts in the Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Monastery during the preaching process? In the end, no one had expected that Master Tam Yuan did not leave his martial arts to the people of Sabodhi Monastery, nor did he leave it to Zhongxian, the #1 person in the younger generation of the Buddhist sect in the Jianghu. He actually wanted to leave it to Chu Xiu, who was not related to him and had a bad reputation in the Jianghu. Chapter 469. Master Tam Yuan wanted Chu Xiu to inherit his inheritance. Even Chu Xiu himself did not expect that he would be able to replace Li Yuan so easily, and successfully seize the opportunity to transform into a dragon that belonged to Li Yuan. However, before Chu Xiu could say anything, the people around him were already agitated. They would not care if Chu Xiu obtained an inheritance of the demonic path, but how could a holy monk like Master Tam Yuan teach his inheritance to Chu Xiu? In particular, the Buddhist martial artists present were the loudest in their objections. "Master Tam Yuan, please reconsider. Chu Xiu is not a good person. You can't give him your inheritance." "Yes, please retract your order, holy monk. There are countless talents in our Buddhist sect. Why must you give your inheritance to an outsider?" The surrounding Buddhist martial artists were not the only ones who were agitated. Even the 2 martial Tao masters from Sabodhi Monastery frowned. thinking that Master Tam Yuan's action was inappropriate. However, they did not say it out loud like the others. After all, the martial Tao masters from Sabodhi Monastery were present, so it was not appropriate for them to directly interfere with Master Tam Yuan's choice. As for Zhongxian, he would not say a word. To be more arrogant, he did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance at all. Even though Master Tam Yuan was once a powerhouse in the true fire spiritual cultivation state at his peak, he was still a rogue cultivator after all. The true fire spiritual refinement state was strong, but for so many years in the Great Light Temple, there were at least 80, if not 100, strong practitioners of the true fire spiritual refinement state. With so many people, would the inheritance they left behind really be inferior to Master Tan Yuan? With Zhongxian's status in the Great Light Temple, he could choose any of these inheritance techniques, but Zhongxian had never even learned them. From the day he started learning martial arts, Zhongxian had only cultivated the Bright Ruler Seal. He had forcefully cultivated this technique, which was not considered a top-tier technique, to the acme of perfection. The Bright Ruler Seal could transform into tens of thousands of techniques, and its power was much stronger than if he were to learn other inheritances. Master Tam Yuan frowned. The intense reactions of the people around him were somewhat out of his expectations. Just now, the Long Tianying had only mentioned Chu Xiu's identity and other things. He had not mentioned that Chu Xiu's reputation in Jianghu was actually this bad. At this time, LV Longji directly stood up and said indignantly, "Master Tam Yuan, this Chu Xiu has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He is ruthless and has killed countless people. If you impart your martial arts to such a person, I'm afraid that your reputation will be ruined as soon as you become famous. If you let a person like Chu Xiu obtain your martial arts inheritance, he will only use it to kill people. Why would he use it to save people?" When Master Tam Yuan heard that, he immediately frowned. He looked at Chu Xiu and said, "Chu, is that really the case?" If only one person had said that, Master Tam Yuan would not have believed it. However, now that everyone was saying the same thing, even Master Tam Yuan was a little shaken. Chu Xiu's expression did not change as he said, "Master, it's true that I, Chu Xiu, don't have a good reputation in Jianghu, but I've never killed innocent people. In this pugilistic world, it's either people who kill me or I who kill them. If I didn't kill, I wouldn't have reached my current realm and strength. Moreover, when I was the patrol and torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room, the people I killed were all for the sake of order in the Guanzhong torture room, so that more people could live. The previous torture officer of the Guanxi region did not do his job and caused the entire region to be in chaos. All the major factions fought and killed each other, and many people died as well. It was me who used an iron fist to completely control the entire Guanxi region, minimizing the conflicts. Only then did the entire region become increasingly peaceful. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. If I hadn't killed those people, more of them would have died in the future." LV Longji gritted his teeth and said, "Sophistry. Then what do you say about how you foiled my plans in the southwest and incited the various factions to kill each other? For the sake of my second brother, you also caused no small number of killings in the southwest." Chu Xiu indifferently said, "I still say the same thing. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. In the past, there was no ruler in the southwest, so it led to the various factions in the southwest killing each other. Their methods were extremely fierce and cruel. Now that the southwest is under the second prince's control, everyone can no longer kill each other as they please. In the future, there will undoubtedly be fewer deaths. There are gains and losses. In my view, it's very worth it to use those people who died in exchange for the stability of the entire southwest. But Your Highness, because I foiled your plans in the southwest, you slander me in front of Master Tam Yuan. I think that the one with bad intentions is you." Master Tam Yuan sank into deep thought. What Chu Xiu had said was actually quite reasonable. For example, in the East Sea, the hatred between the various islands was as deep as the sea. Everyone attacked and killed each other. Even if there was no hatred between them, they would still fight to the death for the sake of profit. Thus, after Master Tam Yuan arrived at the East Sea, his first step was to use force to completely subdue them and then spread the Buddhist Dharma to establish order. However, Master Tam Yuan was only one person, so this process was very long. Even now, the order he established had not yet spread to the entire East Sea. And from a certain perspective, Chu Xiu's methods and Master Tam Yuan's were the same. It was just that Chu Xiu's methods were more ruthless. If Master Tam Yuan was as ruthless as Chu Xiu and directly killed people, the East Sea would have long since quieted down. Master Tam Yuan was not one of those pedantic old Buddhist monks. Everything he did was based on Buddhist scriptures, and he viewed good and evil so simply. In the past, when Master Tam Yuan was preaching in the East Sea, he had encountered something like this. There were 3 islands in the East Sea called the 3 Evil Islands. There were some extremely vicious people who were ruthless and extremely greedy. The master of the 3 Evil Islands, the green-eyed blood demon, Han Dongming, was a famous devil in the East Sea. He did all kinds of evil and was extremely cruel. At that time, Master Tam Yuan had just stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm. It just so happened that the leader of the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying, had personally asked him for help. Thus, Master Tam Yuan had prepared to get rid of the 3 Evil Islands. As the saying went, capture the ringleader first. Master Tam Yuan had come to the 3 Evil Islands and fought with Han Dongming. He had tried his best to kill him. Just when Master Tam Yuan thought that the ringleader had been killed and the 3 Evil Islands had been completely dealt with, the other villains on the 3 Evil Islands had fled at the sight of him. They had scattered throughout the entire East Sea and caused even more evil consequences. They had killed countless people. In the end, it took Master Tam Yuan a few years to get rid of all the villains on the 3 Evil Islands. In just a few years, this group of people had caused more damage to the East Sea than in the past few decades. This karma was undoubtedly on Master Tam Yuan's head. At the same time, it made Master Tam Yuan blame himself. If it had been other Buddhist martial artists, they would probably not care about anything else after killing Han Dongming and becoming famous in the pugilistic world. However, Master Tam Yuan was reflecting on whether he had done the right thing or not. Han Dongming had committed countless crimes, but he had established the 3 Evil Islands and controlled most of the villains in the East Sea within a certain range, so the threat they posed was limited. However, after he killed Han Dongming, the evil people of the 3 Evil Island lost their restraints and caused even greater destruction. From then on, Master Tam Yuan understood a principle. Sometimes, good and evil could not be seen clearly at a glance. Someone did something that everyone thought was good, but in the end, it caused great evil. Some people seemed to be wicked beyond redemption, but their existence saved countless lives. Karma was the most difficult thing to predict. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan could not decide if he should impart his cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. However, after seeing the glimmering jade slip, Master Tam Yuan made up his mind. He was not good at divination, but he believed in his old friend Daoist Tianchu's attainments in divination. Since the jade slip had glowed after meeting Chu Xiu, it proved that he was the person he had been waiting for. He did not have much time left and could not afford to delay any longer. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "Everyone, there is no need to say anything more. I have made up my mind. Since Chu is willing to be my successor, I might as well impart my martial arts to Chu instead of bringing them to the grave." Seeing how determined Master Tam Yuan was, everyone present immediately revealed confused expressions. LV Longji's expression was even gloomier. The martial arts inheritance belonged to Master Tam Yuan. He could give it to whoever he wanted. How could they snatch it from him? However, LV Longji was still secretly cursing Master Tam Yuan in his heart. It seemed that he had truly become muddle-headed with age. He had such a great reputation overseas in vain, but in the end, he had blindly chosen Chu Xiu as his successor. How could he go about explaining this? Because of the internal injuries in Master Tam Yuan's body, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, he did not want to delay any longer. He turned to Long Tianying behind him and said in a deep voice, "President Long, please help me find a quiet place. I want to impart my cultivation technique to Chu." Not only did the Cetacean Society have businesses in the East Sea, but they also had some businesses in the East Sea County. Hearing this, Long Tianying immediately arranged for Master Tam Yuan and Chu Xiu to an inn that belonged to the Cetacean Society. He directly chased everyone away, leaving only Master Tam Yuan and Chu Xiu. He then personally guarded the door. Seeing that Master Tam Yuan had made up his mind, the monks from the Sabodhi monastery could only shake their heads helplessly and leave, including Zhong Xian. Abbot Su Ci had only asked Zhong Xian to invite Master Tam Yuan to the Great Light Temple to preach. Now that he had said that Master Tam Yuan would not come, his task was naturally considered completed. As for the outside of the inn, there were still many busybodies waiting around. They wanted to see how things would develop. Inside the inn, Master Tam Yuan sat cross-legged and looked directly at Chu Xiao. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, although my cultivation is not considered strong, it is not weak either. Now, I will hand them over to you, but can I trust you?" Chapter 470. Master Tam Yuan stared at Chu Xiao. There was no pressure, only calmness. He had met many people overseas and experienced many things, but he could not see through Chu Xiao. It should be said that the human heart was the most difficult thing to see through. Although the jade slip and the comments had proven that Chu Xiao was the one who met the requirements the most, Master Tam Yuan's intuition told him that something was wrong. Chu Xiao did not directly answer Master Tam Yuan. He only said in a deep voice, "Good and evil are only separated by a single thought. Even if I promise you now, I reckon you won't believe me. The path of martial arts is difficult. I can only promise that I will do what I should do in the future." Master Tam Yuan nodded. Chu Xiao's words made him feel at ease. If Chu Xiao patted his chest and said that he would definitely do good and save people in the future, Master Tam Yuan would not believe him. He had stayed in the East Sea for a long time and had seen many things like human nature being evil. If Chu Xiao pretended to be too hypocritical, it would be very easy for Master Tam Yuan to see through him. Looking at Chu Xiao, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "I just hope that I didn't make the wrong choice with my cultivation. Chu, don't disappoint this old monk. Now that I have begun the cultivation transfer, I have decided to disperse all my cultivation. A part of it will return to the world. I can't collect this part of the power, so I can only let it drift away. However, I still have a part of extremely pure power that I can inject into your body, Chu, to help you take a step forward. Therefore, you have to be ready later. Empty your mind and prepare to receive my power. Don't worry, this is an extremely pure power. It doesn't contain any impurities, and the amount won't be too great. At the very least, with the strength of your physical body, you can completely control it." After a pause, Master Tam Yuan continued, "I've learned a lot of things in my life. I was born in a small temple, and the cultivation techniques I've learned aren't very powerful. I reckon you won't be interested in them. Later on, I obtained quite a number of cultivation techniques in the East Sea. There are strong and weak ones among them. Therefore, I only plan to teach you 2 martial arts. One of them is an ancient cultivation technique that I accidentally found in the East Sea. There are even traces of Tantric Buddhism in it. However, I saw that its power is not weak, so I cultivated it. This cultivation technique is called the sun-shifting technique. The great sun-changing art was derived from the meaning of stealing the heavens and changing the sun. It could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and fuse it into one's body, unleashing one's potential to the extreme. However, its might was powerful, and it was easy to injure others and oneself. The sun of the sun-shifting technique also has the meaning of Vairocana. Changing the sun is to exchange one's state of mind with Vairocana. Therefore, whether your body can withstand the power of Vairocana will depend on you. As for the second technique that I'm going to impart to you, it's the formless sealing palm imprint that I created by gathering countless Buddhist techniques. Form is emptiness and emptiness is form. When the formless sealing palm is cultivated to the extreme, the 5 skandhas are all emptiness. Life and death gather in the palm, evolving into the myriad worlds of heaven and earth, changing constantly. When speaking of the formless sealing palm, even Master Tam Yuan couldn't help but reveal a hint of pride in his tone. Although the sun-shifting palm was also his main cultivation technique, it was written by predecessors. Even if he learned it, there was nothing to be proud of. On the other hand, the formless sealing palm was created by Master Tam Yuan himself. In Master Tam Yuan's opinion, it was the condensation of his lifelong martial Tao. Master Tam Yuan put his palms together, and his body emitted spots of Buddhist light. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, empty your mind. When I transmit these powers to you, the sun-shifting technique and the formless sealing palm will also enter your mind. It also contains some of my cultivation experience, allowing you to skip the cultivation stage after obtaining these 2 cultivation techniques and be able to use them instantly. However, it's something that you didn't cultivate on your own, so its peak is limited. The experience I give you doesn't belong to you, so it can only help you evolve 80% of the charm of the cultivation technique. If you want to walk your own Tao, you still have to rely on yourself." As the Buddhist light around Master Tam Yuan became more and more intense, the light also surged into Chu Xiu's body. This instantly added a lot of things to his mind, and he also felt like his body was about to explode. However, the power really entered Chu Xiu's body as Master Tam Yuan said, causing Chu Xiu to instantly feel as if he had entered another realm. The biggest difference between the unity of heaven and man and the five Qis unification was that the power that could be mobilized was different. No matter how strong the five Qis unification was, it could only mobilize one's own power. At the unity of heaven and man realm, one's own power had already faintly merged with heaven and earth. When one attacked, one could naturally borrow a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Even if it was just a trace, the power was shocking enough. Of course, whether the borrowed power was strong or not depended on how strong one's understanding of the power and how strong one's control over the power. Otherwise, no matter how much power one borrowed, one would not be able to control it and would only be a waste. At this moment, Chu Xiu was already immersed in a very strange state. Half of his mental power seemed to be in his body, and the other half was in heaven and earth. As the two gradually merged, Chu Xiu suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if he had stepped into another world. In such a short time, he had actually stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, Chu Xiu already had a vague premonition of stepping into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, at that time, Chu Xiu was still lacking an opportunity. Now, Master Tam Yuan had given him this opportunity. Finally, Chu Xiu could successfully step into this realm, and the process of breaking through could be said to be without any obstacles. This could be attributed to Chu Xiu's stable foundation and deep accumulation. It could also be said that Master Tam Yuan's power was too strong. He was so strong that he had given Chu Xiu so many things without saying a word. However, it was not over yet. Chu Xiu was far from happy. Master Tam Yuan's sun-changing technique and formless sealing palm had not been imparted yet. Compared to the previous power, these two techniques were more important. Therefore, Chu Xiu still did not move. Instead, he directly opened up his mind, allowing the words in Master Tam Yuan's experience to be poured into Chu Xiu's mind. In fact, Master Tam Yuan's actions were very similar to the Tantric sex enlightenment technique. It could create an expert at an extremely fast speed. The sun-changing technique had a trace of the Tantric sex aura, and it was not surprising that Master Tam Yuan used a technique similar to the Tantric sex enlightenment technique. However, Master Tam Yuan imparted everything he knew without reservation, which was a huge damage to his mental power. Now that Master Tam Yuan was nearing the end of his lifespan and was on the verge of death, he felt at ease using this method to pass down his techniques. Meanwhile, over 10 miles away from Dragon Beach, Zhongxian had already started to return to the Great Light Temple. At that moment, a monk in white clothes in his 40s ran over hurriedly from afar. When he saw Zhongxian, his eyes lit up, and he quickly ran over and said, "Martial nephew Zhongxian, have you seen Master Tam Yuan?" Zhongxian looked at the monk in white clothes, put his palms together, and said, "Greetings, Martial Uncle Ming Qi. I've seen Master Tam Yuan, but he refused to come to our Great Light Temple." "Where's Master Tam Yuan now?" Ming Qi quickly asked. Zhongxian said, "Master Tam Yuan chose Chu Xiu to be his successor. He's currently imparting his techniques in the inn outside Dragon Beach." Ming Qi slapped his thigh and shouted, "Oh no! I was still a step too late." Master Su Jing deduced that Master Tam Yuan wants to leave his techniques in the Central Plains. If our Great Light Temple can obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, we can successfully obtain Master Tam Yuan's reputation. We can even use this reputation to go to the East Sea to preach. How can you let Master Tam Yuan impart his techniques to someone else while you're there? And it's even Chu Xiu. The Great Light Temple had 3 major Zen halls and 6 major martial academies. Among them, the 3 major Zen halls had the least number of people, but they were the strongest. The Karma Meditation Hall did not focus on martial arts, but the Karma secret techniques of the Buddhist sect. Its master, Venerable Maitreya, Su Jing, was comparable to the divination masters of Taoism in terms of divination and karma deduction. The Maitreya Buddha was the future Buddha, and Su Jing's nickname was Venerable Maitreya. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the karma path were. Moreover, even Abbot Su Ci had to consult Su Jing for most of the Great Light Temple's decisions and let him deduce them before making a decision. Although this could not ensure that the Great Light Temple would never make a mistake, it could reduce the error rate to the minimum. This time, it was the same to welcome Master Tam Yuan. After deducing that Master Tam Yuan was preparing to leave behind his inheritance, Su Jing immediately had an idea. The Great Light Temple did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but the Great Light Temple cared about Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Master Tam Yuan had already laid the foundation in the East Sea. At this time, if someone from the Great Light Temple went to the East Sea as Master Tam Yuan's successor, then the pressure of preaching would undoubtedly be very low. Therefore, Su Xi immediately sent Ming Qi over to remind Zhong Xian of this matter. Ming Qi was not very anxious at first. After all, in his opinion, even if Master Tam Yuan wanted to leave behind his inheritance, he would definitely leave it to Zhong Xian. Among the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present to welcome Master Tam Yuan, the old monks of the Subodhi monastery were about the same age as Master Tam Yuan. As for the other Buddhist martial arts practitioners, how could they compare to Zhong Xian? In the end, who would have thought that in the end, not only did Master Tam Yuan not give his inheritance to Zhong Xian, but he gave it to Chu Xiu, who was not a Buddhist. Compared to the anxious Ming Qi, Zhong Xian was still calm. He just said lightly, "Abbot did not tell me that I must obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance. Why can't I watch?" Chapter 471. Ming Qi was rendered speechless by Zhong Xian's words. He did not know what to say. With Zhong Xian's personality, not only in the outside world, but also in the Great Light Temple, Zhong Xian could complete all the tasks given by the elders in the sect perfectly. However, as long as it was not part of the task, Zhong Xian would not even look at it even if the sky fell. Ming Qi did not know what to say to such a person. In any case, Zhong Xian's strength was obvious. No matter how eccentric Zhong Xian's personality was, his strength alone was enough to make him the successor of the Great Light Temple. Buddhist techniques were not meant to be mastered quickly, and the Great Light Temple's techniques placed the most emphasis on the foundation. However, Zhong Xian was able to reach the oneness of heaven and man realm before he was 30 years old, and his combat strength was close to the level of a martial Dao master. Such strength was extremely rare in the entire history of the Great Light Temple. At that moment, Feng Qi Xiao also walked out of the small town outside the Dragon Beach with a pot of yellow wine in his hand. He looked like a sloppy person. Previously, he drank half a pot of yellow wine from Chu Xiu. Sword King City was located in the western region, and while the grape wine there was very famous, there was no yellow wine there. After tasting it, 7th young Master Feng was surprised to find that it tasted pretty good. He then filled a pot and prepared to leave. After all, he was already here. Now that he had shown up and made his presence known, his mission in Sword King City could be considered completed. At that moment, Feng Qi Xiao also saw Zhong Xian and Ming Qi on the side of the road. He could not help but raise his head and snort coldly. Then, he used the long sword in his hand to carry the wine pot and walked in another direction. Ming Qi suddenly felt a little comforted when he saw Feng Qi Xiao like this. Compared to Feng Qi Xiao, Zhong Xian was considered more normal. At the very least, they did not have to worry about the sect's reputation being shamed. If the people of Sword King City knew that Feng Qi Xiao behaved like this and did not have the aura of a young elite or the successor of Sword King City, they would probably go crazy with anger. However, Ming Qi didn't know that the people of Sword King City wouldn't go crazy because they were used to Feng Qi Xiao's behavior. At this time, Ming Qi suddenly slapped his head. Now was not the time to think about these useless things. He hurriedly pulled Zhong Xian and said, "Martial nephew Zhong Xian, quickly go back. It might not be too late to stop Master Tam Yuan." The expression on Zhong Xian's face did not change as he allowed Ming Qi to pull him towards the small town of Dragon Beach. For Zhong Xian, these things didn't matter. Ming Qi came from the Karma Zen Hall, so his combat strength was inferior to him. However, because Ming Qi's seniority was higher than his, he was his martial uncle. Now that Ming Qi was preparing to organize Tan Yuan to pass on his cultivation to Chu Xiu, he would follow suit. Looking at the two figures, Feng Qi Xiao's eyes showed a trace of doubt. He bit the mouth of the wine flask, took a big gulp, and followed behind them. Feng Qi Xiao was just bored and wanted to watch the show. His Karma Sword Dao was about comprehension, not practice. Therefore, for Feng Qi Xiao, a long period of closed-door cultivation didn't have much effect on improving his cultivation except for accumulating his internal force. Therefore, the seventh young Master Feng spent most of his time wandering outside instead of cultivating in seclusion within the sect. Now that his realm was the same as Zhongxian's, he was close to becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster, so he needed an epiphany. Therefore, he had been wandering around the Jianghu during this period. Now that he saw Zhongxian's actions, Feng Qixiao's intuition told him that there must be a show to watch, so he immediately followed them. At this time, at the entrance of the small town's inn, Long Tianying and several Cetacean Society revered elders were guarding the entrance, protecting Master Tam Yuan. Although Long Tianying was a businessman, he also knew what kindness and morality were. If it weren't for Master Tam Yuan's help in the past, his Cetacean Society would have been annexed by the three evil islands. How could it still have its current glory? Moreover, Long Tianying was not a martial Dao Grandmaster himself. It was very difficult for a Chamber of Commerce to recruit a martial Dao Grandmaster-level guest revered elder. It was precisely because of Master Tam Yuan's words that the Cetacean Society did not make things difficult for people in Donghai, and could develop to its current scale. Now that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away, Long Tianying also wanted to send Master Tam Yuan on his last journey to fulfill his last wish. At this time, the crowd outside to watch the show was suddenly separated, and Zhongxian and Ming Qi hurried over. Everyone present was stunned. What was Zhongxian planning to do when he returned? That monk in white was also from the Great Light Temple? Ming Qi walked in front of Long Tianying and said, "I'm Ming Qi from the Karma Meditation Hall of the Great Light Temple. I would like to see Master Tam Yuan. Please make way." Long Tianying frowned slightly and said, "Master Tam Yuan is currently imparting his skills. Please wait for a moment, Master Ming Qi." Ming Qi immediately said, "It's precisely because of this that I want to see Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiao has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He has committed all sorts of evil deeds and has a huge grudge against the Buddhist sections. We must not impart our skills to such an evil thief. Let me in. I'll definitely persuade Master Tam Yuan to rescind his order." Long Tianying's eyes revealed a hint of disdain when he heard that. Although he was indebted to Master Tam Yuan, in reality, Long Tianying did not have a good impression of monks, especially Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery, the two leaders of the Buddhist sections. In the past, when the East Sea was filled with chaos and slaughter, why didn't you all come to save us? It was only now that Master Tam Yuan's name has spread throughout the pugilistic world that you all came to welcome him. Master Tam Yuan was Master Tam Yuan, and the other monks were other monks. Long Tianying was very clear on this point. Therefore, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. Master Tam Yuan has ordered that no one is allowed to enter when he's imparting skills. Moreover, Chu Xiao was personally chosen by Master Tam Yuan as his successor. Be it Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery, they shouldn't have the right to interfere." Ming Qi's expression turned cold when he heard that. He snorted and said, "It's up to Master Tam Yuan whether he agrees or not. Get out of the way. I'll explain it to Master Tam Yuan personally." In front of Zhongxian, Ming Qi's attitude was very amiable. He did not put on any airs of a senior or master at all. But in reality, Ming Qi was an elite disciple of the Karma Zen Hall, someone who would be heavily nurtured in the future. His status in the entire Great Light Temple was not low. Long Tianying was the leader of an overseas chamber of commerce. Normally, Ming Qi would not even be bothered with him. Why would he listen to his argument now? Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I won't let you in. Master Tam Yuan cannot be disturbed when he's imparting skills. As long as I'm here, no one can step into this inn." "You're so stubborn." Ming Qi snorted and slammed his palm at Long Tianying. In an instant, a seven-colored Buddha's light bloomed and was extremely dazzling. However, Long Tianying was not afraid at all. The Gang Qi around his body condensed into one. Like a tsunami, he punched out with a loud bang. The wind broke through the waves, and its power was boundless. As the leader of the Cetacean Society, it was impossible for Long Tianying to only be in the realm and not have any combat power. It should be known that he had built the Cetacean Society from scratch. In the beginning, he had fought with many people, so Long Tianying's combat power was not bad. He was actually evenly matched with Ming Qi. Of course, this did not mean that Long Tianying's strength was strong enough to compete with the martial artists of the Great Light Temple. But Ming Qi was a special case. He came from the Karma Zen Hall and majored in the Karma Zen Hall's secret, future incarnation scripture. This technique was mainly about karma deduction and cultivating the state of mind. Although it was also helpful for one's own combat power, to exert its true power, one must wait until the realm of the martial Tao Grand Master. The current Ming Qi was too far behind, so he was tied with Long Tianying. If it were the monks of the Vajra Hall or the Dharma Hall, it was estimated that it would be very easy to deal with Long Tianying. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, and Zhongxian next to him was like a statue, Ming Qi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This Zhongxian had no foresight at all. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, would he not make a move? Did he have to shout it out and make it so embarrassing? In fact, Zhongxian was really ready to make a move, but not now. It was when Ming Qi was in danger. In Zhongxian's way of thinking, Ming Qi was his martial uncle. If he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood and being injured, he should make a move. However, he was still fighting with others and it was very lively. If no one spoke in the situation, Zhongxian would not be a busybody. However, at the moment, Ming Qi really had no way to deal with Long Tianying. He could only shout, "Zhongxian, come and help me." As soon as these words were spoken, Ming Qi heard the discussions of the surrounding martial artists. They were all saying that he was useless. As a master's uncle, he actually had to ask for a disciple's nephew's help. Furthermore, a martial artist from the Great Light Temple actually had to fight 1 against 2. It was really too degrading. However, at the moment, Ming Qi just wanted to stop Master Tam Yuan from passing on his skills. He could not care so much. At this time, Zhongxian had already made a move. Taking a step out, in an instant, Long Tianying felt dark clouds covering his head as if a storm was coming. A thick pressure had completely surrounded him. This change immediately made Long Tianying's expression change. Was the existence of the second on the Longhu leaderboard really so terrifying? This kind of aura was already comparable to a martial Tao Grandmaster. In fact, even in some martial Tao Grandmasters, Long Tianying had not felt such a terrifying aura like Zhongxian's. A Wisdom King seal fell. It was a simple Wisdom King seal, but it suppressed everything. It was as if everything in this world would be completely torn apart and crushed into nothingness under this Wisdom King seal. Long Tianying shouted angrily and took a deep breath. In an instant, an endless amount of heaven and earth yuan qi was swallowed into his stomach. Then, it merged with his own earth energy and suddenly exploded, forming a huge vortex-like cyclone that blasted towards Zhongxian. World engulfing. However, this move of Long Tianying could not even block Zhongxian for a breath's time. In an instant, the cyclone shattered and the earth energy was extinguished. Long Tianying was directly blown away by this seal and vomited blood. Chapter 472. They were both at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but Ming Qi and Long Tianying were evenly matched. Now that it was Zhongxian's turn, Ming Qi could not even withstand one move, which showed how big the gap was. Long Tianying was also shocked. This was the first time he fought with a young talent on the Longhu list. Putting others aside, this Zhongxian was definitely a monster, even more terrifying than some martial arts masters. Go! Block the door. Don't let anyone in to disturb Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying shouted at the other Cetacean Society guest chamberlains. Those martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm did not hesitate. Even in the face of Zhongxian, an expert who was famous in the underworld and even seriously injured Long Tianying in one move, they did not hesitate to rush forward. It had to be said that the quality of these guest chamberlains recruited by Long Tianying was quite high. These people were all well-known martial artists in the East Sea. After they were recruited into the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying treated them like brothers and generously recruited them. So now at this critical moment, these guest chamberlains were willing to fight with their lives for Long Tianying. Zhongxian was expressionless, but his hands did not stop at all. All kinds of bright king seals fell, and none of the martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm present could withstand one move from him. All of them were seriously injured and vomited blood by his seal. And as the fight went on, everyone could see that Zhongxian did not want to kill people. He still held back. Otherwise, some of the weaker martial artists in the Cetacean Society were likely to be directly killed by his bright king seal. At this time in the room, Master Tam Yuan had completely passed on all his power and cultivation method to Chu Xiu. After the inheritance, Although Master Tam Yuan did not die, and his appearance did not change much, Chu Xiu sensed an aura from him, an aura of decay. Master Tam Yuan was almost at the end of his rope. Chu Xiu stood up and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. "Thank you, Master." This Ye Chu Xiu was from the bottom of his heart. After all, although he had obtained his strength and inheritance through deception, it could be said that Master Tam Yuan had willingly given it to him. Master Tam Yuan reluctantly waved his hand and said, "My last wish has been fulfilled. My purpose in returning to the Central Plains has been fulfilled. My mind is clear, and I no longer have any thoughts. I should be the one thanking you, Chu." Chu Xiu remained silent. Sometimes, it was better for people to be muddle-headed. If they saw everything too clearly, they would have many regrets. At this time, Chu Xiu looked outside the inn and said, "Master, how should we deal with the people from the Great Light Temple?" When they were imparting their cultivation methods, Chu Xiu and Master Tam Yuan had already noticed the commotion below. However, they were at a crucial moment and could not be disturbed. Therefore they did not show up. Master Tam Yuan sighed when he heard that. "Back when I didn't go to the East Sea, there were only 2 sacred grounds of the Buddhist sects for all the Buddhist disciples in the world. One was the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect, and the other was the Sabodhi Monastery of the Southern Buddhist sect. Because of the cultivation method I cultivate, I've always treated the Great Light Temple as the sacred ground in my heart. I've always dreamed of going to the Great Light Temple. However, as time passed, this desire became weaker and weaker. In the end, I no longer had any interest in going to the Great Light Temple. Under the bright Buddhist light, there is no room for any darkness. I don't know when it started, but the Great Light Temple has changed. They've become extreme and arrogant. They only care about strengthening their Buddhist light so that the light can suppress more darkness. However, they've never thought about how to completely find the source of the darkness instead of blindly suppressing it." Seeing the sacred ground of the Buddhist sects in the past, the place of his dreams, turn into such a state that was filled with interests and schemes, Master Tam Yuan could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Xiu was not as emotional as Master Tam Yuan. He merely said calmly, "Master, there's one thing you're wrong about. If there's no darkness, how can there be light? Everything needs to be compared. Perhaps the Great Light Temple itself does not want this darkness to be completely destroyed." Master Tam Yuan was stunned. What Chu Xiu said made some sense, but it was a little too extreme. Although Master Tam Yuan felt that the Great Light Temple's actions were a little too realistic, the other party should not be that dark. Sighing again, Master Tam Yuan said, "Chu, go and settle the rest. I can't fight anymore, and I can't stop them." Chu Xiu nodded and walked straight out the door. Meanwhile, below, the Cetacean Society guests that Long Tianying had brought with him did not last long. They were already heavily injured and defeated by Zhong Xian. Almost all of them had lost their ability to fight. Seeing that Zhong Xian and Ming Qi were about to step into the inn, Long Tianying forced himself to stand up and stood in front of the 2 of them. This time, even the onlookers were a little surprised. This Long Tianying was really something. At this time, he still dared to stand in front of Zhong Xian and Ming Qi. Was this person really not afraid of death? Zhong Xian said calmly, "Move aside." Long Tianying clenched his teeth and shook his head. "The Great Light Temple is so overbearing. Aren't you afraid of attracting criticism?" Ming Qi frowned and snorted. "Overbearing." Since the Great Light Temple is the leader of the Buddhist sects, we can't just watch as our Buddhist martial arts fall into the hands of outsiders. Don't forget, you're just an outsider. Since you don't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for being ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, Ming Qi immediately prepared to make a move and finish off Long Tianying completely. The Great Light Temple had never been afraid of outsiders calling them overbearing. This was because the way the Great Light Temple did things was already very overbearing. They did not care what others said. However, just as he was about to make a move, a flash of a knife roared out from inside the inn. As the flash of the knife approached, boundless demonic energy mixed with the power of blood suddenly descended. The powerful demonic energy from the knife swept across dozens of feet and even enveloped the entire long street. The knife slashed down and a murderous intent rose. As the knife slashed down, Ming Qi could even faintly hear the cries of evil spirits. It was abnormally horrifying. With such terrifying demonic energy, if Ming Qi did not know who was inside, He would even suspect that there was a peerless demon living inside. Raising both palms, an endless Buddhist light bloomed. However, under the demonic knife, the Buddhist light was easily extinguished, just like how Zhongxian had crushed Long Tianying with ease. Just as Ming Qi was about to be killed by the knife, Zhongxian also moved. The sound of Buddhist chanting came from all around him. His body, which seemed to be cast from steel, now bloomed with an even more dazzling golden Buddhist light. A seal blasted out. Vajra subduing demons, shattering mountains and rivers. Guardian deity seal. With a loud bang, Zhongxian directly stood in front of Ming Qi and used the guardian deity seal to block Chu Xiu's knife. As the powerful Gang Qi dispersed, a deep white mark was left on Zhongxian's palm. However, strangely, there was no blood flowing out. Chu Xiu walked out of the inn with his knife in hand. His black robes fluttered in the wind that had yet to dissipate. At this moment, the aura around his body was in harmony with the heavens and the earth, looking extremely mysterious. Everyone could also see that Chu Xiu had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Previously, when the martial arts practitioners in the underworld talked about the Longhu leaderboard, they would discuss the top 5 and the top 10 and so on. After all, to most people, only the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard could be said to be on the same level. This was because those who could be ranked in the top 5 were all existences in the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, they would probably not be discussing the top 5, but the top 6. Looking at Ming Qi and Zhongxian, Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, "In terms of strength, Master Tam Yuan has already passed it on to me. I have also learned the techniques. Why? Now that the Great Light Temple has an opinion, do you still want to go back? What a joke. Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan, and the Great Light Temple is the Great Light Temple. What right do you have to interfere with Master Tam Yuan's decision? Isn't the Great Light Temple being a little too involved? Do you really think that you are the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, and that all the martial arts practitioners in the Buddhist sects have to listen to the Great Light Temple?" As these words were said, many of the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present felt a little unnatural. The Buddhist sects in the world respected the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery. Everyone knew this, and they had always done so. However, being respected was being respected. What the Great Light Temple did today was indeed a little overbearing. Although they did not approve of Master Tam Yuan passing down the techniques to Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk recognized by the entire underworld. His status was not lower than the Great Light Temple's. Even if Master Tam Yuan was planning to pass down the techniques to Chu Xiu, even if he was planning to pass down the techniques to the remnants of the demonic cult, the others would not be able to say anything. Now that the Great Light Temple had such an attitude towards Master Tam Yuan, what would they do if something happened in the future? This made everyone present feel a little uncomfortable. Ming Qi frowned. He suddenly realized that he did not have the slightest advantage when it came to arguing with Chu Xiu. This guy's ability to invert right and wrong and pester people endlessly was not inferior to his strength. Ming Qi was targeting him, but now that Chu Xiu had said this, it became the Great Light Temple that was extremely overbearing and targeting Master Tam Yuan. Therefore, Ming Qi rationally did not want to waste any more time with Chu Xiu. He said coldly to Zhongxian, "Zhongxian, do it." This Chu Xiu used some unknown method to deceive Master Tam Yuan and obtain the inheritance. Our Great Light Temple cannot sit back and watch Master Tam Yuan's inheritance fall into the hands of such a despicable person. Even if you have the inheritance, you must hand it over now. Ming Qi knew about the grudge between Chu Xiu and the Great Light Temple in the past. In the end, it was Su Yun, the master of Karma Zen Hall, who spoke up to settle it. However, Ming Qi did not care about Su Yun's words. Although the Karma Zen Hall's strength was not as strong as Karma Zen Hall, its status was more important than Karma Zen Hall. Karma Zen Hall's strength was only because of its master, Su Yun, while the Karma Zen Hall's importance to the Great Light Temple was because of the Karma Zen Hall itself. Chapter 473. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Zhongxian. He did not expect that he would have to fight with Zhongxian again so soon. In fact, although Ming Qi from the Great Light Temple was overbearing, what he said was true. Chu Xiu's power inheritance was obtained through deception. However, with Chu Xiu's character, how could he spit out the things that entered his mouth? He did not have such a habit. Therefore, This battle was inevitable and Chu Xiao was willing to accompany him. Chu Xiao had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Normally, he would need to retreat for a period of time to familiarize himself with his realm. However, for the current Chu Xiao, it was much faster to familiarize himself with his realm when fighting with someone than when he was in seclusion. Especially when his opponent was Zongxian, the same Zongxian who had previously given Chu Xiao a lot of pressure. On the other side, Zongxian paused after hearing Ming Qi's words. However, he also stood up. In fact, Zongxian did not want to fight because it was meaningless. Zongxian's character was more stubborn, but he was not an idiot. He could think. In front of so many people, Master Tam Yuan had already passed on his power and cultivation technique to Chu Xiao. Even if they forced Chu Xiao to hand over the cultivation technique, what was the use? What the Great Light Temple really wanted was not the cultivation technique, but Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Therefore, if they were to make a move now, they would only be able to earn some useless reputation. In fact, there was not much meaning to it. However, Ming Qi was his master uncle and Zongxian's elder. Since he had spoken, Zongxian would not refuse as long as it did not affect the overall situation. With a step forward, the Buddha light around Zongxian had condensed to the extreme, making him look like a god or a demon. The Wisdom King seal fell, but this time it was not an ordinary Wisdom King seal. It was the Wrath Wisdom King seal. The Buddha flame rose and suppressed everything. Chu Xiao, who had stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm, was completely different from the previous Chu Xiao. Even if they had not officially fought, Zongxian could feel the gap between them. Therefore, he used all his strength in this attack. The demonic aura in Chu Xiao's eyes rose, and he also took a step forward. In an instant, demonic flames soared into the sky. Taking another step forward, the blood-refined god aura soared into the sky, transforming into a blood-colored blade that coiled around the blade. Taking the third step, Chu Xiao's body was completely enveloped in a killing intent. Entering the selfless killing state, there was nothing in the world that he could not kill. Chu Xiao continuously unleashed his strongest state, stirring the winds and clouds around him. Strands of power passively seeped into Chu Xiao's body. This was a completely different realm. Taishang Wang Qing. This heaven and earth did not have any attributes to begin with. Devils could survive in this heaven and earth, and Buddhas could also shine under the sun. Therefore, how much power of heaven and earth Chu Xiao could draw over depended entirely on how high his compatibility with this heaven and earth was. He was a devil, and this heaven and earth was a devil. As the blade slashed down, boundless evil ghosts wailed, as if the gates of hell had opened, making people feel extremely creepy and evil. At this time, the blade intent of the Avicii three blades had already seeped into Chu Xiao's bones. The incomparably evil blade collided with Zongxian's angry Akalanatha seal, and in an instant, a strong wave broke out. The demonic aura and Buddha's flame splashed everywhere, and a series of violent explosions came one after another. The powerful force made everyone's expression change. They had just exchanged blows, but the surrounding ground had already begun to crack, and the entire long street had become a mess. If these two people continued to fight, perhaps a small town would be destroyed by these two people. Amidst the boundless demonic flames, Zongxian's body was shrouded in Buddha's light. Facing the slash of Chu Xiao's blade aura, he slashed down one after another with the Akalanatha seal, directly and violently colliding with Chu Xiao's blade aura. Chu Xiao's hands did not stop. Under the selfless killing realm, all the Gang Qi in his body condensed on the blade. The demonic blade slashed wildly, and in an instant, he had already slashed out hundreds of times. The sky was filled with demonic aura and blade aura, and it almost covered the sun. The fight between these two people was simple and violent to the extreme. They were completely relying on their own strength to fight head-on. It was just that one was unintentional, while the other was intentional. Zongxian's fighting style had always been like this, crushing all along the way and extremely powerful. And Chu Xiao was not only good at brute force. At this time, he was only doing this to hone his own realm's strength. However, in the collision between the Akalanatha seal and the demonic blade, everyone also discovered that Zongxian still had the upper hand. Chu Xiao's figure did not retreat, but Zongxian faced Chu Xiao's blade aura head-on and moved forward. The powerful demonic blade was either shattered by his Akalanatha seal, or he used his body to resist some of the aftershocks, and he did not suffer the slightest injury. Zongxian was not only terrifyingly strong, but even his physical body was so strong that it was almost abnormal. It was no wonder that Feng Qi Xiao called Zhongxian a freak. If Chu Xiu's powerful demonic aura blade aura had slashed on other martial artists in the unity of heaven and man realm, that person would probably have been immediately sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. The weaker ones might even have been killed directly. But what if it had slashed on Zhongxian? It only left a white mark, and the damage caused to Zhongxian could be said to be negligible. Seeing this scene, Feng Qi Xiao, who was watching the battle from the crowd, could not help but look serious. Zhongxian's cultivation level was even stronger than before. The first time Chu Xiu fought with Zhongxian had not used his full strength. It was only now that Zhongxian had revealed his full cultivation level. Zhongxian's reputation in the underworld was based on his Akalanatha seal, which was ever-changing and immeasurably powerful. However, in reality, the Akalanatha seal was not considered a top-notch peerless technique in the Great Light Temple. It could only be considered not bad. However, Feng Qi Xiao knew that the physique tempering technique that Zhongxian cultivated was one of the strongest among the many physique tempering techniques in the Great Light Temple. It was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations, the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. Although this technique was a secret peerless technique of the Great Light Temple, it was not very famous in the underworld because very few people could successfully cultivate it. The Moonlight King's glazed golden body was a glazed Light King Buddha form that refined one's body like a weapon. The glazed Light King would evolve the indestructible glazed pure land in one's body. When cultivated to the end, one's body would not be indestructible, but it would be like Vajra glazed, impervious to all spells and repelling all evil. Furthermore, the Moonlight King's azure glass golden body had a miraculous healing effect. Even if one were to suffer a serious injury during a battle, with the power of the alchemist azure glass light Buddha Lord, he would be able to recover at the fastest speed possible. Therefore, those who fought with Zhongxian, even if they had the upper hand in the early stages, would definitely be a nightmare in the later stages. However, although this technique was powerful, it had extremely high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude and willpower. It could even be said that it was indispensable. Those with aptitude could not withstand the pain of refining one's body like refining a weapon, and those who could withstand such pain did not have the aptitude. Therefore, in the past 1,000 years, Zhongxian was the only one who could successfully cultivate the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. When Zhongxian faced Chu Xiu, he had already unleashed his physical cultivation to the extreme. He pushed all the way to Chu Xiu, and another Wisdom King seal landed. Its power was unparalleled. The mighty Wisdom King seal. When the seal landed, it was like a 5-fingered mountain crashing down. The pressure it brought to Chu Xiu made it hard for him to breathe. At that moment, Chu Xiu retracted his sword and formed a seal. The sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. He had unleashed the heaven sun gazing at air to its extreme, but it was still useless. Was Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal really flawless? Otherwise, under Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air, he could see several loopholes, but it was still useless. Even if Chu Xiu attacked these loopholes, in the face of absolute power, he would still be unable to defeat Zhongxian's Wisdom King seal. And if he wanted to escape, Zhongxian's aura had already sealed off all escape routes for Chu Xiu. As long as Chu Xiu retreated and escaped, Zhongxian's attack would definitely pour down. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only face it head-on. The Wisdom Fist seal exploded. Earth energy condensed and covered the sky. But under Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal, the Wisdom Fist seal was directly shattered. Instead of retreating, Chu Xiu advanced. The Perfect Aquarius seal, the Great Vajra Wheel seal, and the Sun Wheel seal came crashing down. 3 seals were unleashed consecutively, and the power of the 3 seals stacked together to collide with Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal. With a loud explosion, a pit of over 30 meters was blasted under the feet of the 2 of them. Even the soil was turned into dust by the powerful earth energy storm. A huge force attacked, and Chu Xiu could not help but feel a sharp pain in his arm. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open, and blood spilled out. In terms of power, even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he was still inferior to Zhongxian. The effect of the great Vajra divine powers in body tempering techniques was not bad, but it was just not bad. On the other hand, the Lunar Treasure Light King Azure Golden Body that Zhongxian cultivated was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations. Even in the Great Light Temple, It was a top-notch existence. The difference between the two was not small. Just as Zhong Xian's eyes were full of Buddha's light and he was about to attack again, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly turned into a dark abyss. It was boundless, and it swallowed Zhong Xian's Buddha's light, instantly pulling him into it. In an instant, countless ferocious evil spirits bit and pulled at Zhong Xian from under his feet, as if they wanted to pull him into the abyss of the netherworld. Beside Zhong Xian, there were countless pink mists surrounding him, and there were Azura goddesses dancing. They were naked, and their expressions were enchanting and extremely seductive. In the sky, there were countless gods and Buddhas that appeared, glaring at Zhong Xian angrily. They scolded him for deceiving his master, destroying his ancestors, and not respecting the precepts. These illusions were like a dream, and it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. This move was a spiritual illusion created by Chu Xiu's combination of the great art of mental demons rotation and the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting. The great art of mental demons rotation used mental energy to attack the opponent's heart and break their state of mind, which was evil and strange. On the other hand, the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting used mental energy to forcefully invade the opponent's mind, which was overbearing and ruthless. At this moment, Chu Xiu combined the two together. While it affected Zhong Xian's state of mind, it was also eroding his mental energy. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.